Hello there and welcome. Tonight I want to take you somewhere gentle, somewhere familiar yet quietly mysterious. It's late now, isn't it? Perhaps you're lying in bed, or maybe you're curled up on a couch, the world outside your window settling into its own kind of sleep. The day has released its grip, and here in this soft darkness, you and I can explore something together, something that has been with you your entire life, yet remains oddly unfamiliar. Tonight we're going to talk about your voice. Not just the sound you make when you speak, but the strange quiet puzzle of why it sounds so different when you hear it played back to you. You know that moment, don't you? That slightly unsettling instant when you hear a recording of yourself for the first time, or even the 100th time, and something inside you whispers, "That can't be me." It's such a common experience, so universal, that we rarely stop to wonder why it happens. But tonight, in this peaceful space we're creating together, we can let that wonder unfold slowly, gently, like a flower opening in moonlight. There's no rush here, no pressure to understand everything all at once. We're just going to float through this mystery together, you and I, letting it reveal itself in its own time. Before we go any deeper into this quiet exploration, I'm curious about you. Where are you listening from tonight? What corner of our vast world holds you right now? And what time is it there, in your particular patch of darkness or twilight? There's something beautiful about knowing that while we share this moment, this exploration, we might be scattered across time zones, across continents, each of us in our own gentle bubble of night or evening. If you're finding comfort in these words, in this journey we're taking together, perhaps you'd like to follow along for more of these sleepy physics adventures. There's a quiet community of us here, people who find peace in pondering the universe's gentle mysteries as we drift towards sleep. But that's just an invitation, as soft as everything else tonight. What matters most is that you're here now, ready to explore this curious thing about yourself that you've probably noticed but never fully understood. The question seems simple at first, doesn't it? Why does your voice sound different on a recording? It's the kind of thing you might dismiss quickly during the day, brushing it off with a casual, "Oh, I just hate how I sound on recordings." But here, in this quiet space, we can recognize it for what it really is, a doorway into something profound about how you exist in the world, how you perceive yourself, and how the universe of sound works around and through you. What if this simple, everyday mystery was actually an invitation to understand something deeper about the nature of perception itself? What if your discomfort with your recorded voice was actually your brain telling you something important about the difference between inner and outer reality? Let's start with something gentle and grounding. Right now, as you listen to my voice, sound waves are traveling through the air around you. They're invisible, of course, these tiny variations in air pressure that carry my words from wherever they're being played to the delicate machinery of your ears. But your own voice, when you speak, that's different, isn't it? When you talk, when you hum, when you whisper to yourself in the darkness, you're experiencing something that no one else can ever truly share, the inside version of your own sound. Imagine for a moment that your body is like a musical instrument, but one that you both play and listen to simultaneously. When you speak, your vocal cords vibrate, creating waves in the air, yes, but that's only part of the story. Those vibrations also travel through the tissues of your throat, through the bones of your skull, through the chambers of your chest. Your whole body becomes a resonating chamber, and you, uniquely, are positioned inside that chamber. You're like someone sitting inside a cello while it's being played, feeling the wood vibrate around you, hearing not just the sound that escapes into the concert hall, but also all the intimate resonances that never leave the instrument itself. This is the beginning of our answer, but we're going to take our time getting there. There's no hurry in this space we're sharing. Think about how sound moves through different materials. You've probably noticed how different your voice sounds in different rooms, how it echoes in a bathroom, how it feels muffled in a room full of soft furniture, how it carries across water or through a forest. Sound is always interacting with its environment, being absorbed, reflected, changed, and your body, your beautiful, complex body, is an environment all its own. When you were very young, before you ever heard a recording of yourself, you were already building an internal model of what you sound like. Every time you cried as a baby, every time you babbled your first words, every time you called out to someone you loved, your brain was taking notes. It was learning to recognize this particular pattern of sound as me. But the version your brain was learning was the full, rich, bone-conducted, internally resonant version. The version that includes all those vibrations traveling through your skull, your jaw, your chest. This became your baseline, your normal, the voice you expect to hear when you open your mouth. The air around you, though, it only knows part of your voice. When you speak, some of your vocal energy escapes into the room as airborne sound waves. These waves travel outward, bouncing off walls, dissipating into the atmosphere, reaching the ears of others. This is the public version of your voice, the one that represents you in the world beyond your body. It's thinner than what you hear internally, missing those low, warm frequencies that travel so well through bone and tissue. It's like the difference between seeing a photograph of a sunset and actually standing there, feeling the warmth on your skin, smelling the evening air, experiencing the full sensory richness of the moment. A microphone, when it listens to you, is remarkably honest. It has no body, no bones, no internal resonance chambers. It simply captures the variations in air pressure that reach its diaphragm. It hears what the room hears, what other people hear, what the universe beyond your body hears, and when you play back that recording, you're suddenly hearing yourself from the outside for perhaps the first time. It's like seeing yourself in a photograph taken from an angle you've never considered, or catching a glimpse of yourself in a shop window when you weren't prepared for it. There's a moment of disconnection, of wondering, is that really me? But here's something gentle to consider. That recorded voice, that stranger's voice, it's not wrong. It's not a distortion or a lie. It's simply another perspective on the same truth. You contain multitudes, as the poet said, and that includes multiple versions of your own voice. There's the voice you know from the inside, rich with all the resonances of your living body. There's the voice others hear, carried on the air, representing you in the shared space of the world. And there's the voice that machines capture, precise and impartial, documenting exactly what was there in the air at that moment. Think about how we use our voices throughout our lives. From your first cry announcing your arrival in the world to every word you've spoken since, your voice has been your primary tool for reaching beyond the boundaries of your body. It's how you call for help, how you express love, how you share your thoughts, how you sing along to your favourite songs when no one's listening. Or at least, when you think no one's listening. Your voice is so intimately yours that it feels like an extension of your very self, which is why hearing it from the outside can feel so jarring. In the darkness of prehistoric caves, our ancestors used their voices to test the depths of unseen spaces, listening to echoes to map their surroundings. They sang and chanted, and the caves sang back, creating humanity's first concert halls. Even then, they must have noticed how different their voices sounded in those resonant spaces compared to the open air. The physics hasn't changed since then. Sound still moves the same way, still bounces and absorbs and resonates according to the same laws. What's changed is our ability to capture and replay it, to hold a mirror up to our sonic selves. Consider the technology that allows you to hear this recording right now. Somewhere, my voice was captured by a microphone, converted into electrical signals, then into digital data, stored, transmitted, and finally converted back into sound. Waves by your speaker or headphones. It's a kind of magic, really, this ability to capture something as ephemeral as sound and replay it later, somewhere else, for someone else. And yet, this same technology that seems so magical is also what creates that unsettling experience of hearing your own voice from the outside. When you speak into your phone, leaving a voice message for someone you care about, you're creating an artifact of yourself. You're placing a piece of your voice into the world separate from your body, able to exist and be experienced without you being present. It's a kind of technological ventriloquism, your voice thrown across space and time. And when you listen to that message later, perhaps checking to make sure it recorded properly, you're encountering yourself as others do, and it can feel like meeting a stranger who's wearing your clothes, living your life, speaking your thoughts. The physicist in me wants to tell you about frequency and wavelength, about how sound waves with different frequencies travel differently through different media. But tonight, let's think about it more gently. Imagine your voice as a spectrum of colours, a rainbow of sound. When you hear yourself from the inside, you're seeing the full rainbow, including deep reds and purples that come from the vibrations through your bones. When others hear you, they're seeing most of the rainbow, but some of those deep warm colours are missing. It's still beautiful, still you, just viewed through a slightly different filter. Your skull, that protective shell that houses your thoughts and dreams, is also an acoustic chamber. When you speak, it vibrates. You can feel this if you put your fingers on your head while you hum. Feel how your whole skull becomes part of the instrument. These bone-conducted sounds travel directly to your inner ear through a different path than airborne sounds. They bypass the journey through the air, the trip through your ear canal, taking a shortcut straight to your hearing apparatus. It's like having VIP access to your own voice, a private performance that no one else can attend. This dual pathway of hearing, through air and through bone, is one of the many elegant solutions that evolution has crafted. It allows you to hear the world around you while also monitoring your own voice, helping you regulate your volume, your tone, your clarity. When you're in a loud environment, you automatically speak louder because you can hear yourself through bone conduction even when the air path is overwhelmed with noise. It's a feedback system that operates below your conscious awareness, constantly adjusting, constantly calibrating. But this same elegant system is what creates our mystery. Your brain has spent your entire life learning to recognize your bone-conducted voice as you. It's woven into your sense of identity at a level so deep you're not even aware of it. Then, suddenly, a recording presents you with only the air-conducted version, and your brain does a double take. It's like looking in a mirror and seeing someone who looks almost like you but not quite. Familiar yet foreign, yourself yet other. There's something profound in this experience, something that touches on fundamental questions about self and perception. Who are you really? Are you the voice you hear from inside? The one that's accompanied you through every moment of your speaking life? Are you the voice others hear, the one that represents you in the world? Or are you somehow both and neither, and more than either could capture alone? These aren't questions with easy answers, and that's okay. Tonight, we're not trying to solve philosophical puzzles, we're just gently exploring them, letting them wash over us like waves on a distant shore. The recording industry has long understood this phenomenon. Singers often struggle when they first hear themselves recorded, having to learn to trust the engineer's ears over their own internal perception. Many vocal coaches encourage their students to record themselves regularly, not as criticism, but as education, helping them understand how their instrument truly sounds in the space beyond their body. It's a process of reconciliation, of learning to bridge the gap between inner experience and outer reality. Some people never quite get comfortable with their recorded voice, and that's perfectly fine. There's no rule that says you have to enjoy hearing yourself from the outside. But perhaps understanding why it sounds different can ease some of that discomfort, or at least transform it from unsettling mystery to understood phenomenon. Knowledge doesn't always change feeling, but it can provide a kind of companionship to it, a gentle explanation walking alongside the experience. Right now, in this moment, your body is performing countless acts of physics without your conscious involvement. Your lungs are creating pressure differentials to draw in air. Your heart is pumping blood through vessels, creating its own rhythm of pressure waves. And every time you breathe out, even silently, you're creating tiny turbulences in the air, little vortices and currents that are uniquely yours. You're a living physics experiment, a biological machine of incredible complexity, and your voice is just one of the many ways you interact with the physical world around you. The room you're in right now has its own acoustic signature. The walls, the furniture, the air itself, all of it shapes how sound moves through the space. If you were to speak right now, your voice would blend with this acoustic environment, creating a unique combination that will never be exactly repeated. Even if you said the same words in the same room tomorrow, tiny differences in air temperature, in humidity, in the exact position of your body would create subtle variations. Your voice is never exactly the same twice, always a fresh creation, always a new interaction between your body and the world. This variability is part of what makes the question of your real voice so interesting. There is no single, definitive version of how you sound. There's how you sound in your bedroom versus your bathroom, how you sound when you're happy versus sad, how you sound in the morning versus the evening, how you sound to yourself versus to others, how you sound live versus recorded. Each of these is real, each is true, each captures some aspect of the complex phenomenon that is your voice. Let's think for a moment about other animals and how they might experience their own vocalizations. A cat purring feels the vibration throughout its body. It's not just making a sound, but creating a full-body experience. Elephants communicate with infrasonic calls that travel through the ground as well as the air, feeling their own calls through their feet as well as hearing them. Dolphins echolocate, sending out clicks and listening to the echoes, their whole head acting as an acoustic lens. Each creature experiences its own voice in ways shaped by its body, its environment, its needs. We humans are unique in our self-consciousness about our voices, in our ability to record and replay them, to analyze and worry about them. We're probably the only species that has ever experienced that jarring moment of hearing itself from the outside and thinking, do I really sound like that? It's a peculiarly human form of self-awareness, enabled by our technology, our complex social structures, our deep need to understand how others perceive us. But tonight, let's not let that self-consciousness be a source of discomfort. Instead, let it be a gentle reminder of the complexity of perception, of the multiple ways we exist in the world. Your voice, in all its versions, is part of the larger symphony of existence. Every word you speak sends ripples through the universe, tiny changes in air pressure that spread outward, affecting everything they touch in infinitesimally small ways. Your voice has moved atoms, has created heat through friction with air, has been converted into electrical signals in the ears of everyone who's ever heard you. In a very real sense, every word you've ever spoken still exists, its energy transformed but not destroyed, dispersed into the background heat of the universe. The law of conservation of energy tells us that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed from one form to another. So your words, your songs, your whispers, your laughs, they're all still out there in some form, part of the cosmic background, part of the history of the universe. It's a romantic thought, perhaps, but it's also scientifically true. You've been adding your voice to the universe's story since the day you were born. As we continue this exploration together, I want you to remember that there's no wrong way to sound. That discomfort you might feel when hearing a recording of yourself, it's not because you sound bad or wrong. It's simply because you sound different from what your brain expects, different from the internal version it's been listening to all your life. It's like finding out that the color blue looks slightly different to other people than it does to you. It doesn't make your perception wrong. It just reveals that perception itself is more complex and subjective than we usually realize. Think about the last time you had a conversation with someone you care about. As you spoke, your words traveled from your mind to your vocal cords, vibrated through your body, emerged into the air, traveled across space, entered their ears, and somehow, miraculously, conveyed meaning from your consciousness to theirs. But what they heard wasn't quite what you heard. They heard the air-only version of your voice, maybe coloured by their own hearing, their own expectations, the acoustics of the space you were in. And yet, despite all these transformations and filters, communication happened. Understanding occurred. Connection was made. This is the everyday miracle of human speech, that despite all the complexity, all the physics, all the subjective perception, we manage to reach each other with our voices. We sing lullabies to children and they feel comforted. We say, I love you, and hearts are moved. We tell stories and imaginations are sparked. All of this happens through vibrations in air, through this imperfect, beautiful, complex system of vocal communication that we usually take completely for granted. Your voice is one of the most intimate things about you. It carries not just your words, but your emotions, your health, your energy level, your cultural background, your personal history. People who know you well can tell from your voice if you're tired, if you're sad, if you're excited, even if you're trying to hide it. Your voice is a window into your inner state, a bridge between your private experience and the shared world. No wonder it feels so vulnerable to hear it from the outside, to suddenly perceive that bridge from a different vantage point. But here's something comforting. Everyone else is in the same situation. Every person you've ever heard speak is hearing themselves differently than you hear them. We're all walking around with these private, internal versions of our own voices that no one else will ever hear. It's like we each carry a secret sound, a personal acoustic signature that belongs only to us. In a world where so much is shared, recorded, made public, there's something beautiful about having this one thing that remains entirely your own. The technology that allows us to record voices is relatively recent in human history. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans spoke without ever hearing themselves from the outside. Voices lived only in the moment of their creation and in the memories of those who heard them. We have no recordings of ancient voices, no way to know exactly how Socrates sounded when he questioned, how Sappho sounded when she recited her poetry, how our great-great-grandparents sounded when they sang lullabies to their children. All those voices, billions upon billions of them, existed and vanished, leaving only the words they spoke, not the sounds that carried them. Now we live in an age where voices can be captured, preserved, replayed endlessly. You can hear recordings of people who died before you were born, can leave recordings that people not yet born will someday hear. It's a kind of time travel, a way of extending the reach of your voice beyond the immediate present. But with this power comes that strange encounter with yourself from the outside, that meeting with your external voice that can feel so foreign. Some people grow to love their recorded voice over time. Musicians, podcasters, radio hosts, people who hear themselves recorded regularly often report that the discomfort fades. The brain is remarkably adaptable, and with enough exposure it can learn to recognize the external voice as also being me. It's like getting used to seeing yourself in photographs from different angles, or learning to recognize your own handwriting, even when it looks different on different papers with different pens. The self is flexible enough to encompass multiple versions of itself. Others maintain a lifelong discomfort with their recorded voice, and that's perfectly valid too. There's no requirement that you enjoy or even accept your external voice. You can go through life speaking, communicating, connecting, without ever fully reconciling with how you sound from the outside. The important thing is not the sound itself, but what you do with it. The words you choose, the kindness you express, the stories you tell, the songs you sing, whether anyone's recording or not. As we move deeper into this exploration, I want to pause and appreciate the sheer complexity of what happens when you speak. Your brain formulates a thought, translates it into language, sends signals to dozens of muscles in your chest, throat, mouth, and face. Your lungs provide the air pressure, your vocal cords create the initial vibration, your throat and mouth shape that vibration into specific sounds. All of this happens in fractions of a second, without conscious effort, thousands of times every day. You're a marvel of biological engineering, and your voice is the sound of that marvel in action. The difference between your internal and external voice is not a flaw in the system, it's a feature. It's the result of millions of years of evolution crafting a communication system that works both for projecting sound outward and for monitoring your own output. It's a compromise, like so many things in biology, between different needs and constraints. The fact that it can sometimes surprise or disconcert us when we hear recordings is a small price to pay for the incredible versatility and functionality of human speech. Consider how your voice changes throughout your life. As a baby, your larynx was positioned higher, allowing you to breathe and swallow simultaneously but limiting your vocal range. As you grew, your larynx descended, your vocal cords lengthened, your resonant chambers expanded, your voice dropped and enriched, especially during puberty. And it continues to change. Aging affects the elasticity of your vocal cords, the resonance of your chambers, the power of your breath. The voice you have today is not the voice you had 10 years ago, and it's not the voice you'll have 10 years from now. This means that every recording of your voice is also a kind of time capsule, preserving not just your words but the physical state of your body at that moment. Old recordings can sound strange, not just because they're external, but because they're capturing a younger version of your vocal apparatus. It's like looking at old photographs and seeing not just different clothes or hairstyles, but a fundamentally younger face. Your voice ages with you, changes with you, reflects your journey through time. The intimacy of voice is something we don't often think about consciously, but it shapes our relationships in profound ways. Think about the voices you love most in the world. Maybe a parent, a partner, a child, a friend. You know those voices so well that you could recognize them in a crowd, could identify them from just a word or two. Those voices have become part of your internal landscape, woven into your sense of home and belonging, and your voice, whether you realize it or not, plays that same role in other people's lives. When someone who loves you hears your voice, they're not comparing it to how you hear yourself internally. They're not aware of the missing bone-conducted frequencies. To them, your air-conducted voice is your voice, complete and whole and perfectly you. What sounds thin or strange to you might sound warm and familiar to them. What you perceive as flaws might be exactly the qualities that make your voice uniquely recognizable and dear to them. This is one of the beautiful asymmetries of human experience. We each know ourselves from the inside while knowing others only from the outside, and yet we manage to build deep connections across that divide. Your internal voice, the one only you can hear, is part of your private world. Your external voice, the one everyone else hears, is your gift to the shared world. Both are real, both are you, both matter in different ways. As we approach the natural resting point of this first chapter, I want to leave you with a thought to carry forward. The difference between your internal and external voice is not a problem to be solved, but a fascinating aspect of being human to be explored and understood. It's a reminder that you are both a physical being, subject to the laws of acoustics and anatomy, and a conscious observer of your own existence. You are simultaneously the instrument and the audience, the speaker and the listener, the subject and the object of perception. In the chapters to come, we'll delve deeper into the specific mechanisms that create this difference. We'll explore bone conduction and air conduction in more detail. We'll look at how your brain processes self-generated sounds differently from external sounds. We'll consider the role of expectations and self-image in shaping your reaction to your recorded voice. But for now, in this gentle space we've created together, it's enough to simply acknowledge the mystery, to hold it lightly, to let it be a source of quiet wonder rather than discomfort. Your voice, in all its forms, is part of the larger conversation of existence. Every time you speak, you're participating in an ancient human tradition of using controlled breath and vibration to share what's inside you with the world outside. Whether you're aware of it or not, whether you enjoy hearing recordings of yourself or not, your voice is constantly bridging the gap between self and other, between inner experience and outer expression. And so we continue, you and I, deeper into this gentle mystery of your two voices. The night has settled around us now, hasn't it? Perhaps you've adjusted your position, made yourself more comfortable, let your breathing slow a little. This is exactly as it should be. We're not in any hurry here. We have all the time we need to explore why you sound like one person to yourself and another person to the world, and what that might mean about the nature of sound, perception, and being. Let's start with what feels most natural, most intuitive. When you speak, you hear yourself immediately, instantaneously. There's no delay, no gap between the intention to speak and the hearing of your own voice. It feels like the most direct, most honest representation of how you sound. After all, you're right there, as close to the source as it's possible to be. Surely this must be the truest version of your voice, the most accurate representation. It seems obvious, doesn't it? And yet, as we've begun to discover, the obvious answer isn't always the complete answer. The truth is that when you speak, you're creating multiple versions of your voice simultaneously. It's like you're broadcasting on several different channels at once, and you happen to be tuned into all of them, while everyone else can only receive some. The sound that emerges from your mouth spreads out in all directions, following the laws of physics that govern wave propagation. But inside your body, a different story is unfolding, a private concert that only you can attend. Let's think about what sound actually is for a moment. At its most fundamental level, sound is vibration. It's molecules bumping into each other, creating waves of compression and rarefaction that travel through whatever medium they're in. In air, these waves move at about 343 meters per second at room temperature, fast enough that they seem instantaneous in a small room, but slow enough that you can notice echoes in large spaces or delays in distant thunder. These waves carry energy and information, encoding everything from simple tones to complex speech in their patterns of pressure variation. When you speak, your vocal cords, more accurately called vocal folds, vibrate as air from your lungs passes through them. These are remarkable structures, able to vibrate hundreds of times per second, adjusting their tension and position to create different pitches and tones. But these vocal folds don't exist in isolation. They're surrounded by tissue, connected to cartilage, embedded in your larynx, which is itself suspended in your throat by muscles and ligaments. When they vibrate, they don't just create sound waves in the air passing through them. They also set up vibrations in all the surrounding structures. Imagine dropping a stone into a still pond. You see the ripples spreading outward on the surface, but that's not the only thing happening. The stone also creates pressure waves that travel through the water in all directions, including downward and sideways. Some of these waves bounce off the bottom of the pond, off the sides, creating complex patterns of interference. The surface ripples are the most visible effect, but they're only part of the total disturbance. Your voice works similarly. The sound that escapes into the air is like those surface ripples, visible and obvious, but there's so much more happening beneath the surface. The vibrations from your vocal cords travel through the tissues of your throat in all directions. Some travel upward through the soft tissues of your pharynx, others travel outward through the muscles of your neck, and still others travel through the cartilage and bone structures that support your larynx. These vibrations move at different speeds through different materials. Through soft tissue, sound travels at about 540 meters per second, nearly 5 times faster than through air. Through bone, it can travel even faster, up to 4,000 meters per second. These different speeds mean that when you speak, the bone-conducted sound actually reaches your inner ear before the air-conducted sound, though the difference is so small, milliseconds, that you don't consciously notice it. Your skull is a particularly interesting conductor of sound. It's not solid bone, but rather a complex structure with air-filled spaces, your sinuses, and fluid-filled chambers. When you speak, your entire skull vibrates, though the vibrations are tiny, measured in micrometers. These vibrations travel directly to your cochlea, the spiral-shaped organ in your inner ear that converts sound waves into electrical signals your brain can interpret. This is bone conduction, and it's a completely different pathway from the one that external sounds take to reach your hearing. The difference between bone conduction and air conduction is profound. When sound travels through air to reach your ears from the outside, it goes through a complex journey. First, it's collected by your outer ear, that shell-shaped structure that's so distinctive to human anatomy. The shape of your outer ear actually helps to funnel sound waves into your ear canal and provides some directional information about where sounds are coming from. The sound then travels down your ear canal, a roughly 2.5 centimeter tube that acts as a resonator, naturally amplifying certain frequencies. At the end of the ear canal, sound waves hit your eardrum, causing it to vibrate. These vibrations are then transmitted through 3 tiny bones in your middle ear, the malleus, incus, and stapes, collectively known as the ossicles. These are the smallest bones in your body, and they act as a mechanical amplifier, concentrating the vibrations from the relatively large eardrum onto the much smaller oval window of the cochlea. It's an elegant system, evolved over millions of years to be sensitive to an enormous range of sounds, while still protecting the delicate inner ear from damage. But when sound reaches your cochlea through bone conduction, it bypasses most of this machinery. The vibrations travel directly through the bones of your skull to the cochlea, stimulating it without going through the ear canal, eardrum, or ossicles. It's like having a secret backstage pass to your own hearing, a direct line that external sounds can't use. This is why you can still hear your own voice clearly even when you plug your ears. The bone-conducted sound continues to reach your cochlea unimpeded. The frequencies that travel well through bone are different from those that travel well through air. Bone conduction is particularly good at transmitting lower frequencies, those deep, warm tones that give voices their richness and fullness. When you hear your voice through bone conduction, you're hearing more of these low frequencies than exist in the air-conducted version. It's like listening to music with the bass turned up. Fuller, warmer, more resonant. This is why your internal voice often sounds deeper and richer than your recorded voice. Air conduction, on the other hand, preserves more of the higher frequencies, the ones that give voices their clarity and distinctiveness. These higher frequencies don't travel as well through bone and tissue. They're absorbed and dampened by the soft materials. So the voice that escapes into the air and reaches other people's ears has a different frequency balance than the one you hear internally. It's brighter, clearer in some ways, but missing some of that low-end warmth that you associate with your own sound. Think of it like this. Imagine you're listening to an orchestra, but you have 2 different listening positions. In one position, you're sitting inside the body of a cello, feeling the wood resonate around you, overwhelmed by the deep, rich tones of the low strings. In the other position, you're sitting in the audience, hearing the full orchestra with all its instruments in proper balance. Neither position gives you the wrong sound. They're just different perspectives on the same performance. Your internal voice is like sitting inside the cello, while your external voice is like sitting in the audience. This frequency difference isn't the only factor at play. There's also the matter of resonance. Your body is full of air-filled spaces that act as resonant chambers. Your throat, your mouth, your nasal passages, your sinuses. When you speak, these chambers resonate at different frequencies, amplifying some tones and dampening others. The shape and size of these chambers is unique to you, which is part of what gives your voice its distinctive character. But you experience these resonances differently from the inside than others do from the outside. From the inside, you feel these resonances as much as hear them. When you speak or sing at certain pitches, you might feel vibrations in your chest, in your face, in the top of your head. Singers often talk about placing their voice in different parts of their body, feeling the resonance shift as they move through their range. This is a real physical phenomenon. Different frequencies really do create stronger vibrations in different parts of your body. But these felt vibrations are part of your internal experience of your voice, something that doesn't translate to the external, recorded version. Your brain plays a crucial role in how you perceive your own voice. It's not just a passive receiver of sound, it's an active interpreter, constantly filtering and processing the incoming signals. When you speak, your brain knows that you're the one producing the sound. It has access to the motor commands being sent to your vocal apparatus, the proprioceptive feedback from your muscles, the intention behind the words. All of this information colours your perception of your own voice in ways that don't apply when you're listening to a recording. There's a phenomenon called the efference copy or corollary discharge, where your brain creates a prediction of the sensory consequences of your own actions. When you decide to speak, your brain not only sends commands to your vocal muscles, but also sends a copy of these commands to your auditory processing areas, essentially telling them, "I'm about to make this sound." This allows your brain to distinguish between self-generated sounds and external sounds, to avoid being startled by your own voice, and to detect any mismatch between what you intended to say and what actually came out. This predictive mechanism affects how you perceive your own voice in real time. Your brain is partially filling in what it expects to hear based on what it knows you're trying to say. It's smoothing over small errors, compensating for variations, creating a consistent perception of your voice that might not exactly match the physical reality. When you hear a recording, though, this predictive mechanism isn't active. You're hearing your voice as external sound, without the benefit of knowing from the inside what's being said. The raw reality of the recording can seem harsh compared to the processed, predicted version you hear when speaking. Let's consider how this plays out in everyday situations. Have you ever been in a loud environment, a party, a concert, a busy restaurant, and found that you could hear your own voice clearly even though you could barely hear the person next to you? That's bone conduction at work, giving you a clear channel to your own voice that isn't affected by the environmental noise. But if someone records you speaking in that same environment, you might be shocked to hear how loud you are shouting, because the recording only captures the air-conducted sound that had to compete with all that background noise. Or think about when you have a cold and your nose is congested. Your voice sounds different to you, often deeper and more muffled. That's because the congestion is changing the resonance of your nasal cavities and sinuses, affecting the bone-conducted sound. But interestingly, other people might not notice as much of a difference in your voice as you do, because the air-conducted sound is less affected by the congestion. You're experiencing a change in your internal voice that doesn't fully translate to your external voice. The psychological impact of this two-voice phenomenon is significant. Your voice is closely tied to your sense of identity. It's one of the most recognizable things about you, one of the primary ways you express yourself and interact with the world. When you hear a recording, and it doesn't match your internal perception, it can create a kind of cognitive dissonance. It's as if you're being told, "This is how you really are," and your brain responds, "No, that's not right, that's not me." This dissonance can be particularly strong for people who use their voices professionally: singers, actors, teachers, public speakers. They often have to go through a process of reconciling their internal perception with external reality, learning to trust outside feedback over their own sensation. Many singers work with recordings extensively, gradually training themselves to recognize and accept their external voice. Some even report that after years of this work, they start to hear themselves more accurately, with their internal perception shifting closer to external reality. But for most of us, who don't regularly record ourselves or perform for others, the gap between internal and external voice remains. We go through life with these two versions of ourselves, the one we know from the inside and the one the world knows from the outside, rarely having to confront the difference. It's only in those moments of hearing a recording that we're reminded of this gap, this fundamental asymmetry in how we exist in the world. The technology of recording adds another layer to this phenomenon. No recording is perfect. Every microphone, every recording device, every playback system introduces its own coloration to sound. A cheap phone microphone might cut off low frequencies, making your voice sound even thinner than it naturally would. Room acoustics affect recordings. A bathroom's hard surfaces create reflections that brighten the sound, while a bedroom's soft furnishings absorb high frequencies, warming the tone. So when you hear a recording of yourself, you're not just hearing your external voice. You're hearing your external voice as interpreted by a particular piece of technology in a particular space. Professional recording studios spend enormous amounts of money on acoustic treatment and high-quality microphones precisely to minimize these colorations, to capture sound as accurately as possible. But even the best recording is still a representation, not reality itself. It's like the difference between looking at the world directly and looking at a photograph of the world. No matter how good the camera, something is always transformed in the translation. This brings us to an interesting philosophical question. If your voice sounds different to you than to others, if it sounds different in different rooms, if it sounds different through different recording devices, then what is your real voice? Is there such a thing as an objective, true version of how you sound? Or is your voice always multiple, always contextual, always dependent on the listener and the listening conditions? Perhaps the answer is that all versions are real, just incomplete. Your internal voice is real. It's the sound of your body vibrating, of sound waves traveling through bone and tissue. Your external voice is real. It's the sound waves you create in the air, the vibrations that reach other people's ears. Recorded versions are real. They're accurate captures of the air pressure variations at a particular point in space and time. Each version tells part of the story, but none tells the whole story. This multiplicity isn't unique to voice. Think about how you look different in different mirrors, in different lighting, from different angles. Think about how food tastes different when you're hungry versus full, when you're sick versus healthy. Think about how a room feels different in the morning versus evening light. Our perception of everything, including ourselves, is always mediated by conditions, by perspective, by the tools we use to perceive. Your voice is just one particularly noticeable example of this general principle. The study of how we perceive our own voices has revealed fascinating things about self-perception in general. Researchers have found that people often don't recognize their own voices when they're played back without warning. In experiments where people are played a series of voices including their own, they sometimes fail to identify their own voice or express uncertainty about it. This is remarkably different from how we recognize other people's voices. We're generally very good at recognizing familiar voices, even from brief samples or in poor quality recordings. This suggests that our knowledge of our own voice is fundamentally different from our knowledge of other voices. We know other voices from the outside, as acoustic patterns in the world. We know our own voice from the inside, as a felt experience, as an intention made manifest. When we encounter our voice from the outside, it's almost like encountering a stranger who happens to be saying exactly what we remember saying. The words are right, the timing is right, but the sound itself feels foreign. Some researchers have suggested that this disconnect between internal and external voice might serve an evolutionary purpose. By maintaining distinct representations of our own voice versus others' voices, we can better monitor our own speech for errors while simultaneously attending to what others are saying. It's a division of labor in the auditory system, allowing us to be both speaker and listener without getting confused about which is which. The way we adjust to our recorded voice over time is also interesting. People who frequently hear recordings of themselves, like podcast hosts or video creators, often report that the discomfort fades with exposure. Their brains seem to build a new model that incorporates both the internal and external versions of their voice. They might still hear the difference, but it no longer feels wrong or disturbing. It's like learning to recognize yourself in profile after only seeing yourself from the front, a new angle on the same identity. This adaptation suggests that our sense of our own voice isn't fixed, but can be updated with new information. The brain is remarkably plastic, able to revise its models based on experience. If you heard recordings of yourself every day for a month, your brain would likely start to integrate that external sound into your self-concept. The stranger would become familiar, the foreign would become native. but most of us don't get that much exposure to our recorded voices, so the gap persists, refreshed each time we encounter a recording after a period of not hearing ourselves from the outside. Children go through an interesting process with this phenomenon. Very young children often don't recognize their own voices in recordings, but they also don't seem particularly disturbed by this. They haven't yet built a strong enough model of their own voice to experience the dissonance that adults feel. As they grow and their self-awareness develops, they start to experience the same surprise adults do when hearing recordings. It's part of the broader development of self-consciousness, of understanding oneself as an object in the world, as well as a subject experiencing the world. The cultural dimension of voice perception is also worth considering. In cultures where oral tradition is strong, where storytelling and vocal performance are highly valued, people might develop different relationships with their voices. In cultures where recording technology is ubiquitous, where people grow up hearing themselves in videos from an early age, the gap between internal and external voice might be smaller. Our relationship with our own voice is shaped not just by physics and biology, but by technology and culture. Professional voice users often develop sophisticated understanding of their two voices. Opera singers learn to use the sensations of bone conduction to monitor their technique, feeling for vibrations in specific parts of their face and skull that indicate proper resonance. Voice actors learn to predict how their voice will sound on recording, adjusting their performance based on how they know the microphone will capture it. They become fluent in translating between internal sensation and external sound. But even professionals can be surprised. Many singers report that they still sometimes cringe when hearing recordings of performances they thought went well. The internal experience of singing, the physical sensations, the emotional expression, the musical intention, doesn't always translate to the recorded sound in the way they expected. There remains something irreducibly subjective about the internal experience of voice that can't be fully captured in any external representation. As we near the midpoint of our exploration, let's pause to appreciate the remarkable complexity we've uncovered. What seemed like a simple question, why does your voice sound different on a recording, has revealed layers upon layers of physics, biology, psychology, and philosophy. We've seen how sound travels through different media at different speeds, how your body serves as both a resonator and a conductor, how your brain predicts and processes self-generated sounds differently from external sounds, how technology mediates between internal and external reality, and yet, for all this complexity, the phenomenon itself remains immediate and accessible. You can experience it right now if you want to. Just hum a few notes, feeling the vibrations in your chest and head, hearing the sound from inside, then record yourself humming the same notes and play it back. There it is, the gap, the difference, the gentle mystery of your two voices. It's science you can feel, physics you can hear, a universe of complexity contained in the simple act of making sound. Now we shift our attention, you and I, to what scientists have discovered about this phenomenon of your two voices. The night continues to deepen around us, and in this quiet space, we can examine the evidence that researchers have gathered, the experiments they've conducted, the measurements they've made. All of this work, carried out in laboratories and recording studios around the world, has been aimed at understanding exactly what we've been exploring together. Why you sound different to yourself than you do to the rest of the world. Scientists have been formally studying voice perception for decades, though humans have surely noticed the phenomenon for as long as we've had recording technology. The first phonograph recordings in the late 1800s must have produced countless moments of startlement as people heard their voices played back for the first time. Is that really me? They must have asked, just as you might ask today. But it wasn't until the mid-20th century, as recording technology became more widespread and audio research more sophisticated, that scientists began to systematically investigate why this happens. One of the most consistent findings across all studies is just how universal this experience is. In research conducted across different cultures, age groups and languages, the vast majority of people report that their recorded voice sounds different from what they expect. It's not just different, it's specifically different in predictable ways. People consistently describe their recorded voice as higher in pitch, thinner in quality, less rich, sometimes more nasal than what they hear when they speak. This consistency across populations suggests that we're dealing with a fundamental aspect of human auditory perception, not just individual quirks or cultural conditioning. Let's talk about frequency for a moment, in the gentlest possible way. Sound waves oscillate at different rates, and we perceive these different rates as different pitches. A sound wave that oscillates slowly, perhaps 100 times per second, we hear as a low pitch. Think of distant thunder or the lowest note on a piano. A sound wave that oscillates quickly, perhaps 1,000 times per second, we hear as a higher pitch. Think of a bird's chirp or a violin's high note. Your voice, when you speak, contains a complex mixture of many different frequencies all happening at once. It's like a chord played on a piano, but far more complex, with dozens or hundreds of different frequencies combining to create the unique timbre of your voice. Scientists can measure these frequencies precisely using tools called spectrographs, which create visual representations of sound. When they analyze the difference between bone-conducted and air-conducted voice, they find something remarkable. The bone-conducted voice, the one you hear internally, contains significantly more energy in the lower frequencies, particularly below 500 Hz. These are the frequencies that give voice its warmth, its fullness, its sense of presence. When you speak, these low frequencies travel efficiently through the bones and tissues of your head, reaching your inner ear with relatively little loss. But when your voice travels through air, these same low frequencies don't propagate as efficiently. They're more easily absorbed by soft materials, more affected by the acoustic properties of the space you're in. By the time your voice travels from your mouth through the air to a microphone, some of those low frequencies have been diminished. The recording captures what's actually in the air, not what's in your bones, so it lacks some of that low-frequency richness that you associate with your own sound. Researchers have conducted elegant experiments to demonstrate this. In one type of study, participants wear special headphones that can deliver sound through both air conduction, normal headphone speakers, and bone conduction, vibrating transducers pressed against the skull. The researchers record the participants' voices, then play them back through different combinations of air and bone conduction. They can literally add back the bone-conducted frequencies to a recording, making it sound more like what the speaker hears internally. When they do this, participants consistently report that the modified recording sounds more like them, more like what they expect to hear. These experiments have revealed that the frequency difference isn't random or chaotic. It follows predictable patterns based on the physics of sound transmission through different materials. Bone conducts low frequencies better than high frequencies, because low-frequency waves have longer wavelengths that can travel through solid material more efficiently. High frequencies, with their shorter wavelengths, are more easily scattered and absorbed by the complex structure of bone and tissue. It's like the difference between ocean waves and ripples. The big waves can travel vast distances across the ocean, while small ripples dissipate quickly. The role of the skull's resonant frequencies adds another layer to this story. Your skull, like any physical object, has certain frequencies at which it naturally wants to vibrate, its resonant frequencies. When you speak at or near these frequencies, your skull vibrates more strongly, amplifying those particular tones in your bone-conducted hearing. These resonances are different for everyone, depending on the size and shape of their skull, the density of their bones, even the amount of soft tissue. This is part of what makes your internal voice not just different from your external voice, but uniquely yours. Scientists have also studied how the brain processes self-generated sounds differently from external sounds, and the findings are fascinating. Using techniques like functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, and electroencephalography, EEG, researchers can watch the brain in action as people speak and listen. They've discovered that when you speak, certain areas of your auditory cortex actually reduce their activity compared to when you hear the same sounds from an external source. It's as if your brain turns down the volume on your own voice to avoid overwhelming itself. This phenomenon, called motor-induced suppression or speaking-induced suppression, happens because your brain predicts the sensory consequences of your own actions. When you decide to speak, your motor cortex sends commands to your vocal muscles, but it also sends a copy of these commands to your auditory cortex, essentially warning it, "Incoming sound that I'm creating." This allows your brain to distinguish between sounds you're making and sounds from the environment, to avoid being startled by your own voice, and to better detect external sounds even while you're speaking. But here's where it gets really interesting. This suppression is calibrated to your expected voice, your internal voice. When you hear a recording of yourself, Your brain isn't generating those motor commands, so the suppression doesn't occur. You hear your recorded voice with the full sensitivity of your auditory system, unmodulated by the predictive mechanisms that usually accompany self-generated sound. It's like the difference between tickling yourself, which usually doesn't work because your brain predicts the sensation, and being tickled by someone else, which works because your brain can't predict exactly when and how it will happen. Researchers have found that this predictive mechanism can be disrupted in interesting ways. In experiments where people's voices are artificially altered in real time, shifted in pitch or filtered in various ways, the brain's suppression response changes. If the alteration is small, the brain still recognizes the voice as self-generated and maintains the suppression. But if the alteration is large enough, the brain starts treating it more like an external sound. There's a threshold where your own voice becomes foreign enough that your brain stops recognizing it as self. The timing of auditory feedback also plays a crucial role. When you speak normally, you hear yourself with essentially no delay. The bone-conducted sound reaches your inner ear almost instantaneously, and even the air-conducted sound only takes milliseconds to travel from your mouth to your ears. But researchers have conducted experiments where they introduce artificial delays in people's auditory feedback, playing their voice back to them through headphones with delays ranging from tens to hundreds of milliseconds. These delayed auditory feedback experiments produce remarkable effects. With small delays, around 50 milliseconds, people often don't consciously notice but may start to speak more slowly or loudly. With delays around 200 milliseconds, many people experience significant disruption to their speech, stuttering, repetitions, inability to maintain fluent speech. It's as if the delayed feedback creates a collision between what the brain expects to hear and what it actually hears, disrupting the smooth coordination of speech production. This shows just how dependent we are on the precise timing of auditory feedback, how our brains use the immediate sound of our own voice to guide ongoing speech. Studies on bone conduction have revealed some surprising details about how this pathway works. It's not just that sound travels through your skull bones to your inner ear. The path is more complex and interesting than that. When you speak, vibrations travel through multiple routes, through the bones of your skull directly, through the soft tissues of your head and neck, through the air in your middle ear cavity, even through the cerebrospinal fluid that surrounds your brain and spinal cord. Each of these paths has different transmission characteristics, different delays, different frequency responses. Your brain somehow integrates all of these signals into a single perception of your voice. Researchers have used accelerometers, devices that measure vibration, placed at various points on people's heads to map how vibrations travel during speech. They've found that different speech sounds create different patterns of vibration. Vowels, with their strong sustained vibrations, create one pattern. Consonants, with their rapid changes and higher frequencies, create another. Your brain has learned to interpret these complex, multipath vibration patterns as your voice, building up this interpretation over your entire lifetime of speaking and hearing yourself. The role of the middle ear in bone conduction is particularly interesting. You might think that bone-conducted sound bypasses the middle ear entirely, going straight to the inner ear. But research has shown that the middle ear actually plays a role in bone conduction too. When your skull vibrates, it causes the air in your middle ear cavity to vibrate, which in turn affects your eardrum from the inside. This creates a complex interaction between bone conduction and air conduction. Even within your own ear, it's like having two different speakers playing the same song but from different positions, creating a rich, complex sound field that only you can hear. Scientists have also studied how different types of vocalization are affected by the internal-external voice difference. Singing, for instance, shows some interesting patterns. Trained singers often report less discomfort with their recorded voice than non-singers, possibly because they've learned to attend more to the external air-conducted components of their voice, even while singing. They've trained themselves to predict how their voice will sound to others, to calibrate their internal perception with external reality. But even professional singers report that certain aspects of their voice, particularly the very lowest and highest notes in their range, can sound surprisingly different when recorded. Whispering presents another interesting case. When you whisper, you're not engaging your vocal cords in the same way as normal speech. Instead, you're creating turbulent airflow that generates noise-like sounds that you shape with your mouth and tongue. The bone conduction component of whispering is much weaker than for voice speech, so the difference between internal and external perception is smaller. This might be why some people report that their whispered voice sounds more similar to their recorded voice than their normal speaking voice does. There's less of that bone-conducted low-frequency enhancement. Research on people with hearing impairments has provided valuable insights into the two-voice phenomenon. People who use bone conduction hearing aids, for instance, experience sound primarily through bone conduction, even for external sounds. They often report that all voices, not just their own, sound different than they did before their hearing loss. Richer, fuller, more like what people with normal hearing experience as their internal voice. This suggests that the bone conduction pathway isn't inherently wrong or distorted, it's just different, emphasizing different aspects of sound. Studies on age-related changes in voice perception have revealed that the gap between internal and external voice can change over time. As we age, several things happen. Our hearing often becomes less sensitive, particularly to high frequencies. The bones of our skull become denser, potentially changing their conduction properties. And the tissues of our vocal tract change, affecting the voice itself. Older adults sometimes report that their recorded voice sounds even more foreign than it did when they were younger, possibly because these age-related changes affect internal and external voice perception differently. The psychological impact of voice perception has been extensively studied as well. Researchers have found that most people rate their recorded voice more negatively than others rate it. When participants listen to a set of voices, including their own, without knowing which is theirs, they rate all the voices fairly similarly. But when they know which voice is their own, they rate it more negatively. This suggests that the discomfort with our recorded voice isn't just about the acoustic differences, it's also about self-consciousness, about the vulnerability of hearing ourselves as others hear us. Some studies have looked at what happens when people are exposed to their recorded voice repeatedly. In one experiment, participants recorded themselves reading a passage every day for a month and listened to the recording. Over time, their discomfort decreased, and their ratings of their own voice became more positive. But interestingly, this adaptation was specific to the recording situation. When they heard themselves in a different acoustic environment or with different recording equipment, some of the discomfort returned. This suggests that we don't just adapt to our external voice in general, but to specific versions of it. The cultural and linguistic dimensions of voice perception have also been explored. Different languages use different frequency ranges and patterns, and speakers of tonal languages, where pitch changes meaning, might attend to different aspects of their voice than speakers of non-tonal languages. Some research suggests that speakers of tonal languages show less surprise at their recorded voice's pitch characteristics, possibly because they're more consciously aware of pitch in their daily speech. But the basic phenomenon, the difference between internal and external voice, appears to be universal across all languages and cultures studied. Researchers have also investigated whether people can learn to recognize their own voice more accurately. In experiments where people are played multiple voices and asked to identify their own, performance improves with practice. But even with training, people remain better at recognizing familiar voices other than their own. It's as if our own voice occupies a special category, too familiar from the inside to be easily recognized from the outside, yet too important to our sense of self to be heard objectively. The implications of this research extend beyond just understanding why we sound different on recordings. It touches on fundamental questions about self-perception, about the boundaries between self and world, about how we construct our sense of identity. If we don't even know what we sound like to others, what else about ourselves might we be misperceiving? How much of our self-image is based on internal experience that doesn't match external reality? Some researchers have suggested that the voice perception gap might actually be adaptive, serving important psychological functions. If we heard ourselves exactly as others hear us all the time, we might become overly self-conscious, too focused on how we sound rather than what we're saying. The internal voice, enhanced by bone conduction, might give us confidence to speak, to express ourselves, to use our voice as a tool for communication rather than constantly monitoring it as a performance. The research also has practical applications. Understanding the difference between internal and external voice has helped in the development of better hearing aids, more natural-sounding voice prostheses for people who have lost their larynx, and more effective speech therapy techniques. It's informed the design of headphones and microphones, the acoustics of recording studios, even the audio systems in cars and aircraft, where bone conduction from engine vibration can affect how we hear. In the field of forensic audio analysis, understanding voice perception is crucial. Witnesses who claim to recognize a voice might be influenced by whether they're familiar with the person's internal voice, if they've heard them in person, or only their external voice, if they've only heard recordings. The conditions under which a voice was recorded and played back can affect whether someone recognizes it, even if it's a voice they know well. Virtual reality researchers are grappling with these issues as they try to create more immersive experiences. Should a VR system play back your voice as you hear it internally, or as others hear it? How can they simulate the bone conduction component to make virtual speech feel natural? These questions don't have easy answers, but they're pushing forward our understanding of how voice perception works and how technology can interact with it. As we process all this evidence, all these carefully conducted studies and measurements, we see that science has confirmed and elaborated what you've probably felt intuitively, that your recorded voice really does sound different, and for good physical and neurological reasons. But science has also shown us that this difference isn't a flaw or a problem, it's a natural consequence of the complex ways that sound travels through different media, the sophisticated ways our brains process self-generated versus external sounds, and the multiple perspectives from which any phenomenon can be observed. The evidence tells us that you're not imagining the difference. You're not being overly critical of yourself. You're not mishearing. The difference is real, measurable, predictable. But the evidence also tells us that your discomfort with your recorded voice is partly psychological, partly cultural, partly a matter of unfamiliarity rather than any objective problem with how you sound. Others don't hear your voice as thin or strange. They hear it as you, as the voice they've always associated with you. So here we are, you and I, arriving at a deeper place in our exploration. The night has grown even quieter around us, and in this stillness, we can consider what this phenomenon of your two voices means for your daily life, for your relationships, for your very sense of who you are in the world. Your voice, after all, is not just a physical phenomenon to be measured and analysed. It's one of the primary ways you exist for other people, a sonic signature that represents you in the vast symphony of human interaction. Think about the last phone call you made. Your voice travelled from your mouth into a tiny microphone, was converted into electrical signals, transmitted through cables or radio waves, reconstructed by a speaker on the other end, and somehow, through all of these transformations, it remained recognisably you. The person on the other end heard your words, yes, but they also heard your mood, your energy, perhaps your smile or your fatigue. All of this information was carried in the complex patterns of air pressure that we call your voice, but what they heard, what represented you to them in that moment, was your external voice, the one that still surprises you when you hear it recorded. This is the beautiful paradox of human communication. Every day, billions of us speak to each other, and we're all hearing different versions of ourselves than others hear. We're all walking around with these private internal soundscapes that no one else can access, while projecting external voices that we ourselves don't fully recognize. And yet somehow communication happens, understanding occurs, connections are made. It's as if we're all speaking slightly different languages, the language of our internal voice versus the language of our external voice, but we've all agreed to translate seamlessly between them without even realizing we're doing it. Your voice is how you announce your presence in a room. Before people see you, before they know, you're there. Your voice can reach around corners, through walls, across distances that your body cannot traverse. Hello, you say, and suddenly you exist in other people's consciousness. Your voice creates a kind of extended presence, a way of being in the world that goes beyond the physical boundaries of your body. But this extended presence is made of your external voice, the one that travels through air, the one that others know as you. In our modern world, this phenomenon has taken on new dimensions. We leave voicemails, send voice messages, participate in video calls, create voice recordings for presentations or podcasts or social media. Each of these is a little capsule of your external voice, sent out into the world to represent you. When someone listens to your voicemail, you're not there, but your voice is, carrying not just your words but something of your essence. It's a kind of technological haunting, your voice persisting in time and space beyond the moment of its creation. The workplace has become a fascinating laboratory for voice dynamics. In video conferences, which have become so common, we often hear ourselves through our computer's audio system, a slight echo of our external voice mixed with our internal voice. It can be disorienting, this double exposure of our two voices, Some people mute themselves partly to avoid this uncomfortable mixing. Others have learned to ignore it, to focus on the conversation rather than the strange sound of their own voice coming back to them with a tiny delay. Professional speakers, teachers, and performers develop complex relationships with their voices. A teacher standing at the front of a classroom hears their internal voice, while simultaneously hearing their external voice reflected off the walls, mixed with the sounds of students, chairs, ventilation systems. Over time, they learn to project their voice not based on how it sounds to them internally, but based on how they know it needs to sound to reach the back of the room. They develop an intuitive translation between internal sensation and external effect. Singers face this challenge most acutely. When you sing, especially if you're trying to project your voice or hit challenging notes, the internal sensations can be overwhelming. The vibrations in your chest, throat, and head can be so strong that it's hard to judge what's actually coming out. This is why singing teachers often talk about placement and resonance rather than just sound. They're teaching students to navigate by internal sensation, to trust certain feelings even when they can't accurately hear their external voice. It's like learning to paint while wearing coloured glasses. You have to learn how to compensate for the distortion to create the desired result. But it's not just professionals who navigate this complex relationship with voice. Think about how you modulate your voice in different situations. When you're comforting a child, your voice softens, drops into lower, warmer tones. When you're excited, it rises, quickens, brightens. When you're trying to be taken seriously in a meeting, you might consciously lower your pitch, slow your pace, add gravitas. All of these modulations are based on your understanding of how your voice affects others, but you're controlling them based on how they feel and sound to you internally. You're constantly translating between internal sensation and external effect, even if you're not consciously aware of doing so. The emotional dimensions of voice are profound. Your voice carries your feelings in ways that words alone cannot. A slight tremor reveals nervousness. A subtle warmth indicates affection. A tiny edge suggests irritation. These emotional colorings are present in both your internal and external voice, but they might be perceived differently. What feels like controlled anger to you might sound like barely contained rage to others. What feels like enthusiasm might sound like anxiety. The gap between internal and external voice can sometimes be a gap between intended and received emotion. Consider how intimate voice can be. Whispering to someone you love, your voice becomes a private channel, meant for their ears alone. Singing a lullaby to a child, your voice becomes a blanket of comfort and safety. Speaking to someone in their final moments, your voice might be the last human sound they hear. In these profound moments, the physics of sound waves and bone conduction seems almost irrelevant compared to the human significance of voice. And yet, the physics underlies it all, creating the conditions for these deeply human experiences. The telephone revolutionized human communication, but it also created a new kind of voice, the telephone voice. Limited by the frequency response of early phone systems, which cut off very low and very high frequencies, the telephone voice was even more different from the internal voice than natural external voice. People had to learn to recognize familiar voices through this technological filter. "Is that you?" became a common question in early phone conversations. Today's digital phones have better frequency response, but they still create a particular version of voice, compressed and processed for efficient transmission. Voice assistants and smart speakers have added another layer to our relationship with voice. When you speak to Alexa or Siri or Google Assistant, you're using your voice as a control interface, a way to manipulate technology. But these systems are listening to your external voice, analyzing it with algorithms that have no knowledge of your internal voice. They're learning to recognize you based solely on the air-conducted sound you produce. In a sense, they know a version of you that you yourself don't fully know, the purely external acoustic version of your voice. The rise of voice messages and audio texts has created new social dynamics around voice. Some people love voice messages, finding them more personal and expressive than text. Others hate them, partly because they involve hearing their own recorded voice when they check if the message recorded properly. This divide often falls along lines of comfort with one's external voice. Those who have reconciled with their recorded voice use it freely. Those who haven't stick to text, avoiding the discomfort of hearing themselves from the outside. Social media has amplified these dynamics. Video content creators must confront their external voice constantly, editing videos where they hear themselves speak over and over. Many report that the initial discomfort fades with repetition, but some never fully get comfortable. They develop coping strategies, focusing on the content rather than the sound, having others edit their videos or simply accepting the discomfort as part of the process. They're pioneers in a new relationship with voice, one where the external voice becomes a public, shareable, commentable aspect of identity. The phenomenon of voice filters and effects adds yet another layer. Apps that can change your voice in real time, making it higher, lower, robotic, or cartoon-like, play with the boundaries of vocal identity. When your voice is digitally altered, is it still your voice? These filters often work by manipulating exactly those frequencies that differ between internal and external voice, sometimes making the external voice even more foreign, sometimes, accidentally, making it closer to what you hear internally. In therapy and counseling contexts, voice plays a crucial but often unexamined role. A therapist's voice can be soothing or activating, warm or clinical. Clients project onto their therapist's voice, hearing authority or judgment or acceptance in its tones. But the therapist hears their own voice from the inside, possibly unaware of how it's being received. Similarly, when clients speak about difficult experiences, their voice might crack or shake in ways they don't fully perceive internally, but which communicate volumes to the therapist listening externally. The legal system has had to grapple with questions of voice and identity. Voice identification in court cases raises complex questions. If a witness says, "I recognize their voice," what exactly did they recognize? The external voice they've heard before, and under what conditions? A voice sounds different in a small room versus a large space, when the speaker is calm versus stressed, when heard directly versus through a wall or a recording. The gap between internal and external voice is just one of many gaps that complicate the seemingly simple act of recognizing someone by their sound. Language learning presents unique challenges related to voice perception. When you're learning to pronounce sounds in a new language, you're trying to match your output to a model you've heard externally, but you're controlling your output based on internal sensation and sound. This mismatch can make it difficult to know if you're producing sounds correctly. Many language learners are surprised when they hear recordings of themselves speaking the new language. They thought they sounded much more native than they actually do. The internal voice can deceive us into thinking we're pronouncing things correctly when we're not. The gendered dimensions of voice add another layer of complexity. Societal expectations about how men's and women's voices should sound affect how people modulate their voices and how they feel about them. Some people consciously pitch their voices lower or higher to conform to or resist these expectations, but they're making these adjustments based on their internal perception, which might not match the external effect. A person trying to sound more authoritative by lowering their voice might not realize that to others, they just sound like they're forcing an unnatural tone. For transgender individuals, voice can be a particularly significant aspect of identity and presentation. Voice training to develop a voice that aligns with one's gender identity involves learning to navigate the gap between internal and external voice in new ways. It requires developing new proprioceptive awareness, new relationships between sensation and sound. It's a profound reminder that voice is not fixed, but can be consciously reshaped, and that the relationship between internal and external voice can be actively renegotiated. The aging of voice adds temporal dimension to our exploration. Your voice changes throughout your life. The high, thin voice of childhood, the cracking voice of puberty, the mature voice of adulthood, the potentially weakening voice of old age. But these changes happen gradually, and you hear them from the inside. You might not notice how much your voice has changed until you hear an old recording. Then suddenly you're confronted not just with your external voice, but with your younger external voice, a double stranger. It's your voice, but not your voice. You, but not you. A sonic ghost from your own past. Consider how voice functions in memory and dreams. When you remember someone speaking, which voice do you remember? The one you heard externally or some internal reconstruction? When you dream of speaking, do you hear your internal or external voice or something else entirely? These questions probe the boundaries of how voice exists in consciousness, how it's encoded in memory, how it persists in imagination. The voice in your head when you think might be different from both your internal and external speaking voice. A third voice, perhaps, the voice of thought itself. The relationship between voice and identity goes even deeper. Your voice is part of how you recognize yourself as continuous through time. Even as your body changes, as your face ages, as your circumstances shift, your voice maintains a certain consistency that helps anchor your sense of self. But which voice, internal or external, is doing this anchoring? Perhaps both, creating a kind of stereoscopic sense of self, with the gap between them providing depth and dimension to your identity. In moments of strong emotion, the gap between internal and external voice can become particularly noticeable. When you're crying and trying to speak, you might feel relatively in control internally but sound completely broken up externally. When you're angry, you might feel you're being firm but sound aggressive. When you're nervous, you might feel you're managing it well but sound obviously anxious. These moments reveal how our internal perception can be a poor guide to our external presentation, how the voice that feels right from the inside might be sending very different signals on the outside. The phenomenon extends to non-verbal vocalizations too. Your laugh sounds different to you than to others. Your cry, your sigh, your hum, all of these have internal and external versions. Each creates a different pattern of bone conduction, a different internal sensation. The laugh that feels full and genuine to you might sound forced to others, or vice versa. Even these most spontaneous expressions of emotion are filtered through the dual nature of voice perception. As we sit with these implications, we begin to see that the gap between internal and external voice is not just a curious quirk of acoustics and anatomy. It's a fundamental aspect of the human condition, a reminder that we exist simultaneously as subjects experiencing the world and as objects in the world being experienced by others. Your voice, in its duality, embodies this philosophical complexity. You're both the singer and the song, the speaker and the spoken, the internal resonance and the external wave. And now, here in the deepest part of the night, we come back to where we began, you and I. We return to this simple, quiet puzzle of your two voices, but we return with new understanding, new appreciation for its complexity and beauty. The question hasn't changed. Why does your voice sound different on a recording? But our relationship to the question has deepened. We've traveled through physics and biology, through psychology and philosophy, and now we can hold this mystery more gently, more knowingly, even as it retains its essential mysteriousness. Let's slow down even more now. Let your breathing deepen, let your mind settle, and let's revisit this phenomenon as if encountering it fresh, but with all the understanding we've gathered resting quietly in the background. When you speak, right now, if you were to hum a single note, you would experience it as a full-body event. The air rising from your lungs, the delicate dance of your vocal cords, the resonance in your chest, throat, and head. You would hear it through multiple pathways simultaneously, through the air from your mouth to your ears, through the bones of your skull, through the tissues of your neck and face. All of these signals would arrive at your inner ear at slightly different times with slightly different frequency contents, and your brain would seamlessly weave them together into the single perception you call my voice. We come back again and again to this simple, quiet puzzle. Each time we return, it reveals new facets, new depths, like a crystal turned slowly in candlelight. The question itself becomes a kind of meditation, a koan of modern life. What is the sound of your own voice? Is it the one you hear from inside, rich with bone conduction and bodily resonance? Is it the one others hear, carried on air shaped by space? Is it the one machines capture, precise but limited? Or is it somehow all of these and none of them, a phenomenon too complex to be reduced to any single perspective? Imagine your voice as a soft glow emanating from your body. When you speak, this glow brightens, pulses with the rhythm of your words. From inside, you see this glow filtered through the amber of your bones, the rose of your blood, the pearl of your teeth. It's warm, familiar, intimate. But from outside, others see this same glow unfiltered, in its raw form, mixing with the light of the room, the colour of the air, the reflections from walls and windows. Same glow, different perspectives, each true in its own way, each partial, each beautiful. Let's guide ourselves through a slow, meditative exploration of speaking. If you're comfortable, you might even do this quietly along with me. First, just breathe. Feel the air entering your lungs, filling the spaces in your chest. This is the raw material of voice, the wind that will carry your words. Now, on your next exhale, add just the gentlest vocalization. Not words, just a soft sound. Feel where it resonates, in your chest, your throat, your face, behind your nose. This is your voice at its most basic, vibration made audible, your body becoming a musical instrument. Notice how the sound seems to fill your head from the inside. It's not coming from any particular direction. It's simply there, everywhere and nowhere, like thought itself. This is the bone-conducted component of your voice, traveling through the solid structures of your body faster than the speed of sound in air, arriving at your inner ear through secret passages that no external sound can use. It's a private performance, a concert for one, the sound of yourself that only you will ever truly know. Now imagine that same sound escaping into the room around you. See it as waves rippling outward from your lips, your nose, even through the soft tissues of your throat. These waves spread in all directions, bouncing off surfaces, being absorbed by soft materials, mixing with the ambient sounds of your environment. Some of these waves curve back to reach your outer ears, taking the long way around, arriving milliseconds after the bone-conducted sound, creating a kind of echo of yourself that blends with the internal sound. Your brain has been performing this integration your entire speaking life, from your first cry as a newborn to this very moment. It has learned to treat this complex multipath signal as a single thing, your voice. But it's not really single at all. It's multiple, layered, constantly shifting. Every time you move your head, the air-conducted path changes slightly. Every time you change the shape of your mouth, the resonances shift. Every time you speak in a different room, the reflections create new patterns. And yet, through all of these variations, your brain maintains the illusion of a stable, consistent my voice. We return to the recording, that moment of technological revelation when you hear only the external component of your voice. The recording is honest in its own way. It captures exactly what was there in the air at the position of the microphone, but it's also limited, unable to capture the bone conduction, the internal resonances, the felt experience of speaking. It's like a photograph of a dance, accurate as far as it goes, but missing the movement, the music, the feeling of motion. No wonder it sounds strange. It's you, but only part of you, a slice of the full experience of being you. Think about how many times in your life you've spoken without hearing a recording. Thousands of days, millions of words, countless conversations where your voice existed only in the moment of speaking and in the memories of those who heard you. For most of human history, this was the only way voice existed. Ephemeral, immediate, unrecorded. Your internal perception of your voice was never challenged by external evidence. You could go your whole life believing that you sounded exactly as you heard yourself from the inside. But now we live in an age of recordings, where your voice can be captured, stored, replayed, shared, analysed, manipulated. This technological capability has revealed the gap between internal and external voice, creating a new form of self-consciousness that previous generations never had to navigate. It's a uniquely modern form of existential surprise, the discovery that you don't sound the way you think you sound, that others have always been hearing a different version of you than you hear yourself. We come back to this gap, this space between internal and external, and we can see it not as a problem but as a richness. You contain multiple voices, multiple ways of sounding, multiple modes of existence in the sonic realm. The you that you know from the inside, resonating through bone and tissue. The you that others know from the outside, carried on waves of air. The you that machines capture, precise but partial. Each of these is a legitimate version of you, a different angle on the complex phenomenon of your existence. Let's sit with the feeling of speaking a bit longer. When you speak, you're not just making sound, you're literally moving air, creating pressure waves that physically touch everyone within hearing distance. Your voice is a form of action at a distance, a way of reaching out and affecting the world beyond your body. But you experience this reaching out from the inside, feeling the effort in your lungs, the vibration in your throat, the shaping in your mouth. There's an asymmetry here. You feel the cause while others experience the effect. This asymmetry extends to all aspects of voice. You feel the intention behind your words, the emotion driving your tone, the physical effort of projection, or the relaxation of soft speech. Others hear only the result, the acoustic waves that emerge from all of this internal activity. They have to infer the intention, interpret the emotion, imagine the effort. And they do this based on the external voice, the one that sounds different from what you hear, creating layers upon layers of translation and interpretation in every act of vocal communication. Consider the moments when you're most aware of your voice, when you're speaking in public, when you're being recorded, when you're trying to project authority or convey emotion, when you're singing, when you're speaking a foreign language. In these moments, the gap between internal and external voice can become a source of anxiety. Am I too loud? Too soft? Is my voice shaking? Do I sound confident? These questions arise because you know, at some level, that your internal perception might not match external reality. But consider too the moments when you forget about your voice entirely, when you're laughing with friends, when you're comforting someone you love, when you're lost in telling a story, when you're singing along to music alone in your car. In these moments, the gap between internal and external voice becomes irrelevant. Your voice simply is, doing its job of carrying your thoughts and feelings into the world, bridging the space between you and others. The mystery remains, but it doesn't matter. We return once more to the physical reality of it all. Right now, as you lie there listening, your body is primed to produce voice. Your vocal cords are gently touching, ready to vibrate. Your lungs hold air, ready to provide the power. Your tongue rests in your mouth, ready to shape sounds. Your brain holds words, meanings, intentions, ready to be transformed into acoustic waves. You're a voice waiting to happen, a potential sound resting in silence, a bridge between inner and outer ready to be activated. And when you do speak, later, tomorrow, in your dreams tonight, you'll experience once again the dual nature of your voice, the internal richness that only you can hear, the external projection that represents you to the world, both happening simultaneously, both real, both you, yet neither complete without the other. It's a daily miracle that we've learned to take for granted, a complexity we navigate without conscious thought, a mystery we live with so closely that we usually forget it's mysterious at all. The brain's predictive mechanisms that we discussed earlier, the way it anticipates the sound of your own voice and adjusts its response accordingly, this is happening all the time, below the level of consciousness. Your brain is constantly comparing what it expects to hear with what it actually hears, making tiny adjustments, maintaining the coherent experience of speaking. It's a feedback loop so fast and automatic that you're not aware of it, like the way your eyes constantly make tiny movements to maintain stable vision, or the way your body constantly adjusts to maintain balance. This predictive aspect adds another layer to our mystery. Your brain doesn't just hear your voice, it predicts your voice, creates an expectation of your voice, and then compares reality to that expectation. When you hear a recording, the predictive mechanism isn't engaged in the same way. You're hearing your voice as pure sensory input, without the anticipatory framework that usually accompanies it. It's not just that the sound is different, the entire cognitive context is different. We can return to this thought. Perhaps the discomfort with your recorded voice isn't really about the sound itself. Perhaps it's about the sudden shift in perspective, the jarring experience of encountering yourself from the outside. It's like the philosophical thought experiment of suddenly seeing yourself from a third-person perspective. It would be profoundly disorienting, even if the image was perfectly accurate. Your recorded voice forces a similar shift, from the first-person experience of speaking to the third-person experience of being heard. In the gentle space of this reflection, we can also appreciate the stability that your internal voice provides. Despite all the changes in your life, aging, illness, different environments, different emotional states, your internal voice remains relatively constant, a familiar companion through all of life's variations. It's part of the continuity of self, the thread that connects you to yourself across time. When everything else changes, you can still hum to yourself and hear that familiar internal resonance, that private sound that has been with you since you first began to vocalize. But your external voice has its own kind of continuity. It's the voice that others have learned to recognize, to associate with you, to love. When someone who cares about you hears your voice, even recorded, even over a poor connection, even after years of separation, they recognize you. Not the you that you hear internally, but the you that exists in the shared acoustic space of the world. This external voice, strange as it may sound to you, is the sound of you in other people's lives, the acoustic signature of your presence in their world. We're approaching the threshold between waking and sleeping now, that liminal space where thoughts begin to drift and loop. In this space, the question of your two voices can become dreamlike, philosophical, almost mystical. What if everyone you've ever known has been hearing a different you than you know? What if the voice in your dreams is neither internal nor external, but some third thing, the voice of your unconscious? What if the gap between internal and external voice is a metaphor for all the gaps between self-perception and reality? These questions don't need answers. They're invitations to wonder, to float in the mystery rather than solve it. Your voice, in all its forms, will continue to exist whether you understand it fully or not. Tomorrow you'll speak, and once again you'll hear yourself from the inside while projecting yourself to the outside. The gap will remain, familiar now, perhaps less disturbing, maybe even interesting, a reminder of the beautiful complexity of being human, of having a body, of existing simultaneously as subject and object in the world. As this chapter draws to its close, let's appreciate what we've discovered in our return to the question. We've seen that the simple mystery of your recorded voice opens into vast territories: the physics of sound transmission, the biology of hearing, the psychology of self-perception, the philosophy of identity, the poetry of existence. Each return to the question reveals new depths, new connections, new reasons for wonder. The mystery doesn't diminish with understanding. It deepens, becomes richer, more beautiful. Your voice will continue to be multiple, to exist in different versions for different observers. You'll continue to hear yourself from the inside while others hear you from the outside. Recordings will continue to surprise you with their external perspective. And through it all, communication will continue to happen. Connections will continue to be made. Your voice will continue to carry your presence into the world. The gap between internal and external voice is not a flaw in the system. It's a feature of the beautiful, complex, imperfect way that consciousness inhabits physical reality. The night continues to deepen around us, and in this even quieter hour, we can explore more of what scientists have discovered about your remarkable voice and how it changes, adapts, and reveals itself over time. There are more clues to gather, more gentle evidence to consider, more soft speculation about why you sound the way you do to yourself and to others. These additional discoveries don't complicate our mystery so much as they enrich it, like finding more colours in what you thought was a simple painting, more notes in what seemed like a simple song. Let me tell you about something fascinating that researchers have observed. When people listen to recordings of themselves regularly, podcasters for instance, or video creators, or people who must review their own presentations, something remarkable happens. The initial discomfort, that jarring sense of "that's not me," begins to fade. Not all at once, not completely, but gradually, like eyes adjusting to a different light. The brain, in its magnificent plasticity, begins to build a new model, one that incorporates both the internal and external versions of the voice. In one particularly interesting study, participants were asked to record themselves reading the same passage every day for 3 months. At first, most reported the typical discomfort with their recorded voice, but as the days passed, something shifted. By the end of the first month, many reported that their recorded voice had begun to sound more like them. By the end of the third month, some participants said they could hardly remember why they had been so bothered by it initially. The stranger had become familiar, the foreign had become native. But here's where it gets even more intriguing. When these same participants were later recorded in a different acoustic environment, a larger room with more echo or through a different microphone, some of that old discomfort returned. It wasn't as strong as before, but it was there, a ghost of the original surprise. This tells us something profound. We don't just adapt to our external voice in general, we adapt to specific versions of it, specific acoustic contexts, specific recording conditions. Your external voice isn't one thing, but many things, each slightly different depending on the space, the technology, the moment. Musicians and professional speakers have long known this intuitively. A singer might be comfortable with their voice through their usual studio monitors, but feel startled hearing themselves through a different sound system. A podcast host might be at ease with their voice through their regular recording setup, but feel that old twinge of unfamiliarity when hearing themselves on someone else's phone speaker. The external voice is not a fixed entity but a shapeshifter, changing with every room, every device, every playback situation. Consider how we adapt to our changing voice throughout life, though we might not consciously notice it happening. Your voice today is not the voice you had 10 years ago. It has been subtly shaped by age, by use, by the countless words you've spoken, the songs you've sung, the emotions you've expressed. Yet from the inside, the change is so gradual that you might not perceive it. Your brain updates its model of your internal voice continuously, seamlessly, keeping your sense of self coherent even as the physical reality shifts. But recordings create time capsules. If you listen to a recording of yourself from years ago, you encounter not just your external voice, but your younger external voice. It's a double displacement, outside yourself and backward in time. People often report that old recordings of themselves sound like strangers or like relatives, as if they're hearing a sibling or cousin rather than themselves. The voice is familiar but not quite right, carrying the genetic echo of you but not the current reality of you. There's something poignant about this, isn't there? Every recording of your voice is immediately historical, capturing a moment that has already passed, a version of you that no longer exists. By the time you listen to it, you've already changed, if only slightly. Your vocal cords have experienced a few more vibrations, your brain has processed a few more words, your body has aged by minutes or hours or days. The recorded voice is always chasing the present but never catching it, always showing you who you were, never quite who you are. Researchers have discovered that professional voice users develop what they call vocal proprioception, an enhanced awareness of the physical sensations of speaking that helps them navigate between internal and external voice. Opera singers, for instance, learn to feel specific vibrations in what they call the mask, the front of the face around the nose and cheeks. When they feel these vibrations in the right way, they know their voice is projecting properly, even if they can't accurately hear their external sound over the orchestra. This proprioceptive awareness is fascinating because it represents a third channel of voice perception, neither purely internal nor external but something else, a felt sense of vocal production. Voice teachers often focus on these sensations more than on sound itself. Feel the buzz here, they might say, touching a student's forehead. Feel the resonance there, pointing to the chest. They're teaching students to navigate by internal sensation because it's more reliable than trying to hear your external voice while you're producing it. Some people naturally have more vocal proprioception than others. They're more aware of the physical feelings of speaking, more sensitive to the vibrations in their body. These people often adapt more quickly to their recorded voice because they have this additional channel of information. They can correlate what they feel with what they hear externally, building a more complete model of their voice that bridges the gap between internal and external perception. Let's talk about another fascinating discovery, the role of visual feedback in voice perception. When people watch videos of themselves speaking, they often report that their voice sounds more acceptable than when they hear audio alone. Seeing their own face, their expressions, their gestures seems to help bridge the gap between internal and external voice. The brain integrates the visual information with the auditory, creating a more complete perception that feels more like me than audio alone. This visual auditory integration reveals something important about how we construct our sense of self. We're not just acoustic beings or just visual beings, but multimodal beings, existing across multiple sensory channels simultaneously. Your voice is part of a larger package of self-expression that includes your face, your body, your movements. When all these channels align, the external voice seems less foreign. When you hear your voice in isolation, stripped of its visual context, it becomes more strange. Researchers have also studied what happens when people's voices are artificially modified in real time. Using digital processing, they can shift someone's pitch up or down, add or remove frequencies, change the timbre or resonance. When these modifications are subtle, people often don't consciously notice them, but their speech patterns change. They might speak more slowly, more carefully, as their brain tries to reconcile the mismatch between expected and actual feedback. When the modifications are more extreme, interesting things happen. Some people become unable to speak fluently, stuttering or stopping mid-sentence. Others adapt quickly, adjusting their speech to compensate for the modification. Still others seem to dissociate from their voice entirely, reporting that it feels like someone else is speaking with their mouth. These experiments reveal how dependent we are on the familiar sound of our own voice, how it serves as an anchor for fluent speech production. There's a condition called phonophobia, fear of one's own voice, that affects some people so severely they avoid speaking when possible. For these individuals, the gap between internal and external voice can be a source of genuine distress. They might whisper instead of speaking normally, or avoid situations where they might be recorded. Treatment often involves gradual exposure to recordings of their voice, slowly building tolerance and acceptance. It's a reminder that our relationship with our voice can be complex, even troubled, shaped by psychology as much as physics. On the other end of the spectrum, some people seem to have no discomfort with their recorded voice at all. Researchers aren't entirely sure why, but it might relate to differences in self-perception, in how strongly people distinguish between self and other, or in how their brains process self-generated sounds. These individuals might have a more flexible sense of self, one that easily incorporates multiple perspectives, or they might have less strong predictions about how they should sound. Children's relationships with their recorded voices are particularly interesting. Very young children often don't recognize their own voices at all, treating recordings as if they're hearing another child. Around age 4 or 5, they begin to recognize their recorded voice, but often without the discomfort adults feel. The full adult reaction, that jarring sense of wrongness, typically doesn't develop until adolescence, around the same time that self-consciousness intensifies more generally. This suggests that discomfort with our recorded voice might be as much about social awareness as acoustic difference. In experiments with delayed auditory feedback, where people hear their own voice with a delay of 200 milliseconds or so, something called the Lee effect occurs. Most people begin to stutter, slow down, or speak more loudly, but interestingly, some people are immune to this effect. Musicians, particularly drummers and percussionists who are used to dealing with complex timing, often show less disruption. People who stutter actually sometimes improve their fluency with delayed feedback, as if the delay somehow interrupts their usual problematic feedback loop. These individual differences remind us that there's no single, universal experience of voice. Each of us has our own unique relationship with our internal and external voices, shaped by our anatomy, our neurology, our psychology, our life experiences. What feels natural to one person might feel strange to another. What causes distress for one might be unremarkable for another. The mystery of voice is personal, individual, even as it reflects universal principles of physics and biology. Let's consider how different activities affect our awareness of the voice gap. When you're singing along to music, especially loud music, you might not notice the difference between internal and external voice because the music masks the air-conducted component. You're hearing mostly the bone-conducted version, the internal voice, and it feels natural and right. But if someone records you singing along and plays it back without the music, you might be shocked at how off-key you sound. The music was hiding the reality of your external voice, letting you live in the comfortable illusion of your internal sound. Speaking in noisy environments creates similar effects. You raise your voice to be heard over the noise, but you judge your volume primarily by bone conduction, which isn't affected by the environmental noise. So you might be shouting much louder than you realize. Later, if someone tells you how loud you were, you might not believe them. Your internal perception told you that you were speaking at a reasonable volume. The external reality was quite different. The phenomenon of whispering deserves special attention. When you whisper, you're not using your vocal cords in the normal way. Instead of vibrating to create pitched sounds, they're held open while you force air through, creating turbulent flow that generates noise-like sounds. This dramatically reduces the bone conduction component because there's less vibration to conduct. As a result, the gap between internal and external voice is smaller for whispering. Some people report that their whispered voice sounds more accurate when recorded, more like what they expected. Stage whispers, the kind actors use to be heard by an audience while maintaining the illusion of whispering, involve a different technique. Here, actors add some vocal cord vibration back in, creating what's called a voiced whisper. This increases projection but also increases bone conduction. Actors learning this technique often struggle to judge their volume because the internal sensation doesn't match the external effect. They have to learn to trust their director's feedback over their own perception. Consider how illness affects the voice gap. When you have a cold, your sinuses are congested, changing the resonance of your skull, cavities. This affects the bone-conducted sound significantly, making your voice sound different to you. But the air-conducted sound might be less affected, especially if your vocal cords themselves are healthy. So you might think you sound terrible while others barely notice a difference. Or conversely, laryngitis might make your external voice hoarse and rough, while the internal vibrations feel similar to normal, leading you to underestimate how bad you sound to others. Dental work can create temporary changes in voice perception too. Getting braces, dentures, or even having teeth removed changes the shape of your oral cavity and can affect bone conduction pathways. People often report that their voice sounds strange to them after major dental work, even though others might not notice any difference. Over time, the brain adapts to the new configuration, and the sense of strangeness fades. But it's a reminder of how many factors contribute to our internal voice perception. The role of expectation in voice perception cannot be overstated. Your brain has spent your entire life building a model of what you sound like based on your internal voice. This model becomes part of your self-concept, part of how you imagine yourself in the world. When you hear a recording, it's not just acoustically different. It violates your expectations, challenges your self-concept. The discomfort might be as much cognitive as perceptual, a response to having your self-image disrupted. Some researchers have suggested that people with more flexible self-concepts might adapt more easily to their recorded voice. If you see yourself as multifaceted, constantly changing, context-dependent, you might find it easier to accept that you sound different in different situations. If you have a more fixed self-concept, the evidence that you sound different than you thought might be more disturbing. This is speculation, but it aligns with broader research on personality and adaptation. The question of which voice is real becomes even more complex when we consider modern technology. Auto-tune, voice filters, digital enhancement. These tools can modify your recorded voice to sound more like your internal voice, or to sound like something else entirely. Some podcast hosts use equalization to add back some of the low frequencies that make the internal voice feel rich and warm. Are they creating a more accurate representation of their voice, or a less accurate one? The question has no simple answer. Virtual reality and augmented reality technologies are grappling with these questions in real time. How should your voice sound to you in a virtual environment? Should it mimic the internal voice you're familiar with, the external voice others hear, or something in between? Early VR systems often made people's voices sound strange to themselves, breaking immersion. Newer systems try to model both air and bone conduction, creating a more natural-feeling vocal experience. But natural in a virtual world is itself an open question. As we process all these additional clues, patterns begin to emerge. The gap between internal and external voice is not fixed but fluid, influenced by environment, technology, health, age, and psychological state. It's not a single phenomenon, but a collection of related phenomena, all stemming from the fundamental fact that we experience ourselves from the inside while existing in the world as objects perceivable from the outside. Your voice, in its multiplicity, is a perfect example of this broader truth about human existence. The research also reveals remarkable human adaptability. Given time and exposure, we can learn to recognize and accept our external voice. We can develop proprioceptive awareness to better navigate between internal sensation and external effect. We can use visual feedback to integrate our voice into a more complete sense of self. We can even learn to manipulate our voice based on external feedback rather than internal perception, as professional voice users do. The gap between internal and external voice might be inevitable, but suffering from it is not. In quiet moments like this, when we're exploring these ideas together, the scientific findings blend with personal experience to create a richer understanding. Each study, each experiment, each measurement adds another thread to the tapestry we're weaving, and what emerges is not a solution to the mystery but a deeper appreciation of it. Your voice, in all its forms, is more complex, more variable, more wonderful than we might have imagined when we started this journey. Think about the last time you left a voicemail and then listened to it before sending. That moment of hearing yourself, of deciding whether to re-record or let it go. That's you navigating the gap between internal and external voice in real time. The hesitation you might feel, the quick judgment of good enough or "let me try again," these are modern human experiences that would have been incomprehensible to our ancestors. We've gained the ability to hear ourselves from the outside, but with it comes the burden of reconciling these multiple selves. Some people develop strategies to avoid confronting their recorded voice. They have others listen to their voicemails to check if they recorded properly. They avoid watching videos of themselves. They delegate the editing of their content to others. These avoidance strategies work, but they also maintain the gap, keeping the external voice as a stranger. Other people take the opposite approach, deliberately exposing themselves to their recorded voice until familiarity breeds acceptance. Neither approach is right or wrong. They're different ways of managing the unique challenge of living in an age where we can hear ourselves from the outside. The phenomenon of voice messaging in modern communication deserves special consideration. Unlike phone calls, where you hear your internal voice while speaking voice, messages confront you with your external voice immediately after recording. It's a rapid shift from internal to external perspective that can be jarring. Some people report that they've become more comfortable with their recorded voice simply through the regular use of voice messaging. The repeated exposure in small doses creates gradual habituation, but others find voice messaging particularly challenging. The ability to re-record creates a perfectionist trap. You can always try again to sound better, but better according to which standard? Your internal expectation or the external reality? Some people report recording the same voice message 5, 10, even 20 times, never quite satisfied with how they sound. The technology that allows us to hear our external voice also creates new anxieties around it. Professional streamers and content creators represent a new frontier in voice adaptation. They spend hours every day hearing their own voice through their monitoring headphones, simultaneously experiencing their internal voice and a technologically mediated version of their external voice. Many report that this constant exposure creates a kind of merged perception, where the distinction between internal and external voice becomes less clear. They develop an intuitive sense of how they sound to their audience, a kind of real-time translation between internal sensation and external effect. This adaptation is not without its costs, though. Some streamers report that they begin to feel disconnected from their natural voice, as if they're always performing, always conscious of how they sound. The gap between internal and external voice doesn't disappear but transforms into something else. A constant awareness of the multiplicity of their voice, a permanent double consciousness of speaking and being heard. As we near the end of this chapter of additional evidence and speculation, let's appreciate the sheer volume of human experience and scientific inquiry that has gone into understanding this simple phenomenon. Thousands of research participants listening to their own voices, rating them, describing their reactions. Hundreds of scientists designing experiments, analyzing data, proposing theories. All of this effort to understand why you sound different on a recording, and yet the mystery persists, deepens, becomes more beautiful with each discovery. The evidence tells us that your discomfort with your recorded voice is normal, predictable, based on solid physics and neurology. But it also tells us that this discomfort is malleable, that adaptation is possible, that the gap between internal and external voice can be bridged even if it can't be closed. The evidence tells us that everyone navigates this gap differently, that there's no single right way to relate to your multiple voices, and perhaps most importantly, the evidence tells us that this phenomenon touches on fundamental questions about self-perception, identity, and what it means to exist simultaneously as a subject and an object in the world. Now we move into even gentler territory, you and I, into the deeply human dimensions of voice and connection. The night has become so quiet that we can hear the subtle sounds of existence, perhaps the whisper of air through a vent, the distant hum of electricity, the soft rhythm of your own breathing. In this profound quiet, we can explore how your voice, in both its internal and external forms, serves as a bridge between your inner world and the shared world of human relationship. Your voice is how you reach across the void between minds. When you speak to someone you love, your words travel from the electrical storms of your thoughts, through the mechanical vibrations of your throat, across the ocean of air between you into their ears, and somehow, miraculously, meaning arrives in their consciousness. But remember, what they hear is your external voice, the one that still surprises you in recordings. They have never heard your internal voice, that rich, bone-conducted sound that accompanies you through every day. They know a version of you that you yourself only encounter occasionally, in recordings and echoes. Think about the voices you love most in this world. Perhaps it's a parent's voice, remembered from childhood, reading bedtime stories or singing lullabies. Perhaps it's a partner's voice, familiar as your own heartbeat, saying good morning or good night. Perhaps it's a friend's voice, bright with laughter, warm with understanding. Perhaps it's a child's voice, changing and growing but always precious. Each of these voices exists for you only in its external form. You have never heard them from the inside, never experienced the bone conduction that makes their voices feel complete to them. And yet, despite hearing only this external version, these voices have become part of your internal landscape. You can probably hear them in your mind right now if you try. Close your eyes and summon the voice of someone you love. There it is, playing in your imagination, maybe saying your name, maybe laughing, maybe saying I love you. This remembered voice is neither their internal voice nor exactly their external voice. It's your brain's reconstruction, your memory's version, filtered through all your experiences and emotions. It's a third kind of voice, the voice of memory and love. Just as others hold your external voice in their memories, creating their own internal version of your sound. To someone who loves you, your voice, the external one that sounds strange to you, is the sound of comfort, of home, of connection. They don't hear it as thin or nasal or higher than expected. They hear it as you, complete and perfect in its familiarity. What sounds wrong to you sounds right to them because they've never known any other version of your voice. This creates a beautiful asymmetry in human relationships. We each know ourselves from the inside and others from the outside. We each carry internal voices that no one else will ever hear and project external voices that we ourselves rarely encounter. We're all walking around slightly surprised by recordings of ourselves, while being completely comfortable with recordings of everyone else. It's as if we're all speaking slightly different languages, the language of internal perception versus external projection. But we've all agreed to pretend we're speaking the same one. Consider the intimacy of whispering. When someone whispers to you, they're deliberately reducing their voice to its most minimal form, meant only for you. The bone conduction component of their whisper is already reduced, so what you hear is closer to what they hear internally. Perhaps this is part of what makes whispering feel so intimate. It's not just the physical closeness required or the privacy implied, but also that you're hearing something closer to their internal voice, closer to how they hear themselves. Lullabies occupy a special place in the landscape of human voice. When a parent sings to a child, they're often singing softly, gently, in a way that minimizes the difference between internal and external voice. The parent hears their own voice as warm and soothing through bone conduction, and the child hears something similar through air conduction, especially when held close to the parent's chest where they can feel the vibrations directly. It's one of the few situations where internal and external voice might align more closely, creating a shared acoustic space of comfort and safety. Think about how we use our voices to comfort others. When someone is upset, we instinctively lower our voices, speak more slowly, add warmth to our tone. We're modulating our external voice based on how we imagine it will be received, but we're controlling it based on how it feels internally. We can't hear exactly what the other person hears, but we can feel when our voice has that comforting quality through our internal perception. It's an act of translation, of faith, trusting that what feels soothing internally will sound soothing externally. The telephone transformed human relationships by allowing voices to travel beyond the reach of bodies, but early phones had limited frequency response, cutting off the lowest and highest frequencies. This made voices sound even more different from their internal version, leading to the common experience of not recognizing familiar voices on the phone. "Is that you?" became a necessary question. We had to learn to recognize loved ones through this technological filter, to extract identity from a reduced version of the external voice. Modern technology has brought new complexities. Video calls let us see faces while hearing voices, but they also introduce delays, compression artifacts, and the strange experience of hearing our own voice echoed back with a slight delay. We're simultaneously experiencing our internal voice, our external voice through the computer's feedback, and the other person's technologically mediated voice. It's a complex acoustic environment that our brains are still learning to navigate. Voice messages and audio texts have created a new form of intimate communication. Unlike written texts, they carry tone, emotion, pace, all the subtle information encoded in voice. But they also create a permanent record of the external voice, something that can be played back repeatedly. Some people report feeling more vulnerable sending voice messages than written ones because their voice reveals so much: mood, energy, health, emotional state. The external voice becomes a more complete representation of self than words alone. Consider how voices change in different emotional states. When you're happy, your voice literally brightens. The frequency spectrum shifts toward higher frequencies, creating what we perceive as a lighter sound. When you're sad, the opposite happens. Lower frequencies dominate, creating a heavier sound. But you experience these changes primarily through internal perception, through how your voice feels in your body. Others experience them through external perception, hearing the emotional color of your voice sometimes more clearly than you do yourself. Anger creates particularly interesting vocal dynamics. When you're angry, your voice might feel controlled to you internally, but sound harsh or aggressive externally. The muscle tension that accompanies anger affects the resonance of your vocal tract, creating harmonics that signal threat or aggression. You might think you're being firm but fair, while others hear barely contained rage. This mismatch between internal perception and external effect can escalate conflicts, as each person trusts their own perception over the other's reaction. Love, too, has its vocal signatures. Researchers have found that people's voices change when talking to romantic partners. They often speak in slightly higher pitches, with more variation in tone, with softer attacks on consonants. These changes are usually unconscious, driven by emotion rather than intention. From the inside, you might not notice these changes, but they're clearly audible externally. Your voice betrays your feelings in ways you might not realize. The parent-child vocal relationship is particularly rich. Babies learn to recognize their parents' voices even before birth, hearing them filtered through the amniotic fluid and the mother's body. After birth, they show clear preferences for these familiar voices. Parents in turn develop what researchers call parentese, or baby talk: higher pitch, exaggerated intonation, slower pace. This modified voice seems to be optimized for infant hearing and attention, but parents produce it based on internal feeling rather than conscious acoustic design. As children grow, they use their parents' voices as models for their own. They learn to speak not by directly copying the external sound, but by trying to create similar internal sensations. This is why children's imitations often sound different from the original. They're matching internal feeling rather than external sound. It's a remarkable feat of translation, learning to produce external sounds based on internal targets that are themselves based on external models. The social dimensions of voice are profound. Your voice carries information about your geographic origins, your social class, your education, your age, your health. People make judgments about you based on your voice within seconds of hearing you speak, but these judgments are based on your external voice, the one you don't fully know. You might be unconsciously projecting information about yourself that you're not aware of, speaking in ways that reveal more than you intend. Code switching, changing how you speak in different social contexts, involves navigating between different external voices while maintaining a consistent internal experience. Someone might speak one way at work and another way at home, one way with friends and another way with parents. From the inside, these might feel like minor adjustments, but externally they might sound like different people. The flexibility of voice allows us to inhabit different social roles, but it also creates questions about which voice is the real one. For people who speak multiple languages, the voice phenomenon becomes even more complex. Different languages use different frequency ranges, different resonances, different patterns of intonation. Speaking a second language might literally feel different in your body, engaging different resonances, creating different internal sensations. Some multilingual people report feeling like they have different personalities in different languages, and part of this might be the different internal vocal experiences each language creates. The gender dimensions of voice add another layer of social complexity. Societal expectations about how men's and women's voices should sound shape how people modulate their voices from an early age. Girls might be encouraged to speak more softly, boys to speak more assertively. These modifications are made based on internal perception but judged by external effect. The result is that many people spend their lives performing vocal gender, maintaining voices that might not feel natural internally but meet external social expectations. For transgender individuals, voice can be a particularly significant aspect of transition. Voice training to develop a voice that aligns with gender identity involves learning to create new internal sensations that produce desired external effects. It's a profound reminder that voice is not fixed, but can be consciously reshaped. The gap between internal and external voice becomes a space of possibility, where new ways of sounding and being can be explored and developed. The aging of voice adds temporal complexity to our relationships. As parents age, their children hear the changes in their voices, perhaps a tremor that wasn't there before, a breathiness, a loss of power. But the aging parents might not perceive these changes as strongly from the inside. They might be surprised when their children express concern, not realizing how different they sound externally. The voice becomes a marker of time's passage, audible to others in ways it might not be to ourselves. Consider the voices of those who are no longer with us. If you've lost someone important to you, you might find that their voice is one of the first things to fade from memory. You might remember what they said, but struggle to recall exactly how they sounded. Recordings become precious, preserving the external voice even as the person themselves is gone. But these recordings can also be painful, making absence present through sound, bringing back not just the voice, but all the emotions associated with it. The phenomenon of inner speech, the voice in your head when you think, adds another dimension to our exploration. This thinking voice is neither your internal speaking voice nor your external voice, but something else, something more abstract. Some people report that their thinking voice sounds like their internal speaking voice. Others that it has no sound at all, just the meaning without the acoustic properties. The relationship between thought, internal voice, and external voice remains one of the great mysteries of consciousness. When you read, whose voice do you hear? Your own? The author's imagined voice? No voice at all? People vary tremendously in their experience of inner reading voice. Some people naturally hear their internal speaking voice when they read, others consciously suppress it for faster reading, still others never experience it at all. The written word becomes a bridge between voices, the writer's intended voice and the reader's interpreted voice, neither of which might match the actual external voices involved. Prayer and meditation often involve voice in complex ways. Speaking prayers aloud creates one experience, whispering them another, thinking them silently still another. Some traditions emphasize vocal prayer, believing that the physical act of speaking, the vibrations in the body, are important parts of the spiritual practice. Others emphasize silent prayer, turning inward to a voice that no one else can hear. The choice between vocal and silent practice is partly a choice between external and internal voice, between public and private spiritual expression. Singing opens unique dimensions of voice and connection. When people sing together, in choirs, in crowds, in families, something remarkable happens. Individual voices blend into a collective voice that's more than the sum of its parts. Each singer hears their own internal voice plus the external voices of others, creating a rich acoustic experience that can be profoundly moving. But recordings of group singing often sound different than the experience of participating because they capture only the external blend without the internal participation. Karaoke provides an interesting case study in voice perception. When you sing karaoke, you hear your internal voice, the external voice through the speakers, often with reverb and effects, and the backing track all simultaneously. The reverb and echo can make your external voice sound closer to your internal voice by adding richness and depth. This might be why some people who claim they can't sing discover they enjoy karaoke. The technology bridges some of the gap between internal and external voice. The therapeutic use of voice reveals its healing potential. Vocal therapy doesn't just address speech problems, but can help people process emotions, develop confidence, discover new aspects of themselves. The act of vocalizing, whether speaking, singing, or simply making sounds, creates vibrations in the body that can be calming or energizing. The internal experience of these vibrations might be as important as the external sound produced. Consider how we use voice to self-soothe. Humming to yourself, talking yourself through a difficult task, singing in the shower. These are all ways of using your internal voice to regulate your emotional state. The vibrations in your chest and head created by humming can be physically calming. The act of articulating thoughts out loud, even to yourself, can help clarify thinking. The internal voice becomes a tool for self-care, a way of being your own companion. The relationship between voice and identity is profound but not simple. Your voice is uniquely yours. No one else has exactly your vocal tract shape, exactly your resonances, exactly your patterns of speech. But your voice is also culturally shaped, influenced by everyone you've ever heard speak, every accent you've absorbed, every vocal mannerism you've adopted. It's simultaneously deeply personal and thoroughly social, individual and collective. As we near the end of this exploration of voice and human connection, let's sit with the beauty of it all. Every conversation is a miracle of translation between internal and external voices. Every "I love you" travels from one person's internal experience through the air to become part of another person's life. Every lullaby, every laugh, every whispered secret navigates the gap between how we hear ourselves and how others hear us. And somehow, despite all this complexity, all this potential for misunderstanding, we manage to connect, to communicate, to create shared meaning through the vibrations we send into the world. Your voice, in all its forms, is part of the vast web of human connection. Every time you speak, you're adding your thread to this web, creating connections that ripple outward in ways you might never know. Someone might remember something you said years ago, hearing your external voice in their memory, drawing comfort or inspiration from it. Your voice lives on in the memories of everyone who's ever heard you speak, becoming part of their internal world even as it originated in yours. Here now, in the deepest part of the night, we begin to let everything we've explored settle gently, like sediment drifting slowly to the bottom of still water. The questions we've asked, the mysteries we've examined, the science we've considered, all of it can now begin to rest, to find its place in the quiet understanding that comes not from solving mysteries, but from living peacefully with them. Your breathing has probably slowed by now, your body has relaxed, and we can let the story of your two voices become less of a puzzle to solve and more of a gentle companion to your descent towards sleep. We've travelled far together, you and I, from that first moment of wondering why your voice sounds different on a recording to this deep place of acceptance and understanding. We've seen how sound travels through bone and air at different speeds, carrying different frequencies, creating the two versions of your voice that you know from inside and that others know from outside. We've explored how your brain predicts and processes your own voice differently from external sounds, creating a special category for self-generated sound. We've considered how technology captures only the external component, revealing a version of yourself you rarely encounter. But now, in this quiet hour, we can let all of that technical understanding soften into something more like poetry. Your voice, in its duality, is like moonlight on water. The same light appears as a solid disk in the sky and as scattered diamonds on the waves. Neither view is wrong, neither is complete. Both are beautiful. Your internal voice is the moon itself, constant and familiar. Your external voice is the reflection, changeable and surprising, but carrying the same essential light. Think of how many words you've spoken in your lifetime. Thousands upon thousands, perhaps millions, each one a small burst of acoustic energy that briefly disturbed the air and then dissipated. Most of these words existed only in the moment of speaking, heard by you through bone and tissue, heard by others through air, then gone forever. No record, no trace, except in memory. And in those memories, your words exist in multiple versions, how you remember saying them, filtered through your internal voice, and how others remember hearing them, filtered through your external voice and their own perception. The gap between internal and external voice is not a flaw to be fixed or a problem to be solved. It's simply part of the human condition, part of what it means to be a conscious being in a physical body. You experience yourself from the inside while existing, as an object in the world that others can perceive from the outside. Your voice, travelling simultaneously through your bones and through the air, embodies this duality perfectly. You are both the experiencer and the experienced, the speaker and the spoken, the subject and the object. Let's revisit the key images from our journey, but now with a softer focus, like looking at familiar objects by candlelight. The vibration of your vocal cords, those remarkable folds of tissue that can oscillate hundreds of times per second, creating the raw material of voice. See them not as mechanical objects but as living tissue, constantly moistened by your body, warmed by your blood, moved by your breath. They've been with you since before you were born, growing and changing with you, carrying every word of your story. The resonant chambers of your body, your throat, mouth, sinuses, chest, each adding their own colour to your voice. These spaces are not empty, but full of the warm, humid air of your living breath. They're lined with the soft tissues of your body, each surface absorbing some frequencies and reflecting others, creating the unique acoustic signature that is your voice. From the inside, you feel these resonances as much as hear them, a full-body experience of sound production that no external listener can share. The bones of your skull, seemingly solid but actually alive, constantly being rebuilt and renewed by your body. These bones that protect your brain also conduct your voice, creating a private pathway for sound that bypasses the normal route through air. When you speak, your skull becomes a musical instrument, vibrating with the frequencies of your voice, creating that warm, rich, internal sound that has accompanied you through every conversation of your life. The air around you, invisible but not empty, full of molecules in constant motion, ready to carry waves of pressure that we call sound. When you speak, you're literally moving this air, creating patterns of compression and rarefaction that travel outward at the speed of sound. Your voice becomes part of the atmosphere, mixing with all the other sounds of the world, bouncing off walls, absorbed by soft materials, eventually dissipating into the random motion of heat. But for a brief moment, the air itself carries the pattern of you. Your brain, that remarkable organ that somehow turns air pressure variations into meaning, that distinguishes your own voice from others, that predicts what you're about to say and adjusts its reception accordingly. 3 pounds of tissue that can imagine voices that don't exist, remember voices from decades ago, and create the internal monologue that narrates your life. The same brain that's surprised by your recorded voice is also the brain that adapts to it, that can learn to recognize and accept multiple versions of yourself. Now let these images begin to blur and blend, like watercolors running together in the rain. The boundaries between bone conduction and air conduction become less distinct. The difference between internal and external voice becomes less important. What remains is the simple fact of voice itself, that you can make sound, that this sound can carry meaning, that through vibrations, in air you can touch other minds. The mystery is not diminished by understanding. If anything, it's deepened. Consider that right now, as you listen to these words, you're experiencing your own quiet breathing, perhaps occasionally making small sounds of comfort or adjustment. Each of these sounds has both an internal and external component, but in this relaxed state the difference matters less. You're simply a breathing, occasionally vocalizing being, part of the vast chorus of life on this planet. Somewhere, others are speaking, singing, laughing, crying, all creating their own dual voices, all navigating their own gaps between internal and external perception. The questions we've explored don't need definitive answers. Why does your voice sound different on a recording? We've seen the physical reasons, the neurological reasons, the psychological reasons. But beyond all these explanations lies a simpler truth. It sounds different because you are complex, because you exist in multiple ways simultaneously, because being human means being more than any single perspective can capture. The recording doesn't lie, but neither does your internal perception. Both are true, both are partial, both are you. Let yourself rest in this multiplicity. You don't need to choose between your internal and external voice. You don't need to reconcile them or make them match. They can coexist peacefully, like two friends who know different sides of your personality, both valuable, both offering their own insights. Your internal voice will continue to accompany you through your days, a faithful companion that no one else can hear. Your external voice will continue to represent you in the world, carrying your presence to others in ways you might never fully know. Think of all the recordings that exist of your voice. Voicemails, videos, voice messages, perhaps recordings you don't even remember making. Each one captures a moment of your external voice, a snapshot of how you sounded at that particular instant in that particular place. Together they form a kind of acoustic diary, documenting not just what you said, but how you sounded saying it. Years from now, these recordings will be historical artifacts, preserving a version of you that no longer exists, a younger voice speaking from the past. But also think of all the unrecorded moments, the vast majority of your vocal life that exists only in memory. The bedtime stories you've told or been told, the songs sung in the car, the conversations over dinner, the words of comfort in difficult times. the expressions of joy in moments of celebration. These exist now only as traces in consciousness, your internal version in your memory, external versions in the memories of others. The gap between internal and external voice becomes irrelevant in memory. What matters is that the words were said, the connection was made, the moment was shared. As we prepare to move toward our final chapter, let's appreciate how the simple question we started with has opened into so much more. A practical curiosity about why recording sounds strange has led us through physics and biology, through psychology and philosophy, through the intimate territories of human connection and self-perception. Your voice, in its seeming simplicity, contains multitudes. Every time you speak, you're engaging with fundamental questions about identity, perception, and what it means to exist in the world. The discomfort you might feel when hearing your recorded voice is not a weakness or a vanity. It's a recognition of complexity, a moment of encountering yourself from a different angle, like catching an unexpected glimpse of yourself in a mirror. It's your consciousness recognizing that you are more than your internal experience, that you exist in the world in ways you don't fully control or perceive. This recognition can be unsettling, but it can also be liberating. You're not confined to your own perspective. You exist richly, multiply, in the experiences of others. Let the questions continue to settle, like leaves falling gently through autumn air. Why does your voice sound different on a recording? Because you are both inside and outside yourself. Because sound travels through different media at different speeds. Because your brain processes self-generated sounds differently from external sounds. Because technology captures one perspective while you experience another. Because you are beautifully, irreducibly complex. All of these answers are true, and none of them exhaust the mystery. Your relationship with your voice will continue to evolve. Tomorrow you'll speak, and once again experience the dual nature of your voice. Perhaps you'll leave a voice message and hear yourself played back. Perhaps you'll sing in the shower and enjoy your internal voice without concern for the external. Perhaps you'll talk to someone you love and not think about the gap at all, just letting your voice be the bridge it's meant to be. Each of these experiences will add to your understanding, even if you're not consciously aware of it. The technology around voice will continue to evolve too. New ways of capturing, transmitting, and reproducing voice will emerge. Virtual assistants will become more sophisticated in recognizing and reproducing human voice. Virtual reality will create new challenges in presenting voice in ways that feel natural. But through all these technological changes, the fundamental phenomenon will remain. You will continue to experience yourself from the inside while projecting yourself to the outside, and there will always be a gap between these perspectives. This gap is not a barrier, but a space of possibility. It's where growth happens, where self-awareness develops, where empathy for others' perspectives can flourish. If you only knew yourself from the inside, you'd be trapped in solipsism. If you only knew yourself from the outside, you'd be alienated from your own experience. The gap between internal and external voice holds these two perspectives in productive tension, keeping you grounded in your own experience while remaining open to how others perceive you. As this chapter draws to its close, feel how the questions have softened from sharp curiosities into gentle companions. They don't demand answers anymore. They're content to simply be present, to add their subtle colour to your understanding of yourself and the world. Your voice, in all its forms, continues to exist whether you're thinking about it or not. Right now, even in silence, your vocal cords are gently touching, ready to vibrate when called upon. Your resonant chambers are open and waiting. Your brain holds the patterns of every word you know, ready to transform thought into sound. Soon we'll move into our final chapter, where we'll let this entire exploration dissolve into the approaching sleep. But for now, rest in this place of settled questions, of peaceful complexity, of accepted mystery. Your voice is yours, uniquely and unmistakably, even as it exists in multiple forms. The recording that sounds strange to you is still you. The internal voice that others will never hear is still you. The remembered voices in the minds of those who love you are still you. All these versions, all these perspectives, all these forms of your sonic presence in the world, they're all true, all partial, all part of the beautiful complexity of being human. The night continues to deepen around us, and in this profound quiet, the questions about your voice become less urgent, less demanding. They transform from puzzles to be solved into aspects of existence to be appreciated. Like the question of why the sky is blue or why music moves us. The question of why your voice sounds different on a recording becomes less about the answer and more about the wondering. The wonder itself is valuable, is beautiful, is part of what makes us human. Let everything we've explored tonight exist in your mind like a piece of music you've heard, not necessarily remembered in every detail, but present as an impression, a feeling, a subtle influence on how you understand yourself. The gap between your internal and external voice is no longer a source of discomfort, but a reminder of your complexity, your multiplicity, your rich existence in the world. You're more than any single perspective can capture, and your voice, in its various forms, is proof of this beautiful truth. And now, here at the end of our journey together, we return to where we began. You in this quiet space, perhaps on the very edge of sleep, having travelled through the mystery of your own voice. But we return changed, carrying with us all the understanding we've gathered, all the wonder we've cultivated, all the peace we've found with questions that don't need complete answers. The night has reached its deepest point, and in this profound stillness, we can place your voice in all its forms within the larger context of the sleeping universe around us. Right now, as you rest there, listening to these final words, you are held within a vast web of vibration. The Earth itself is humming at frequencies too low for you to hear. Seismic waves travelling through rock and magma, the planet's own voice speaking in a register below human perception. The atmosphere above you is singing with radio waves, with the electromagnetic vibrations of countless transmissions passing through your body at this very moment, carrying voices and music and data at the speed of light. And somewhere, far beyond our atmosphere, stars are ringing like bells, their surfaces oscillating with acoustic waves that will never escape into the vacuum of space. Your voice, the one that sounds different when recorded, the one that exists as both internal richness and external projection, is part of this cosmic symphony of vibration. Every word you've ever spoken has added its small contribution to the sum total of sound in the universe. The energy of your voice, transformed into heat through friction with air, has become part of the background warmth of existence. In the most literal, physical sense, your voice has changed the universe, even if only in the tiniest, most imperceptible way. But let's bring our attention back to the immediate, to the personal, to you in this moment. Perhaps you can feel the potential for voice resting in your throat right now, not speaking, but ready to speak. Your vocal cords are touching lightly, your breath is flowing gently past them without causing vibration, creating the soft whisper of your breathing. This is voice in its potential state. Like a piano with no one playing it, all the music possible but none of it actual. You carry this potential with you always, this ability to break silence, to create meaning from vibration, to reach across space with sound. Tomorrow, when you wake and speak your first words of the day, you'll once again experience the duality we've explored tonight. You'll hear your voice from the inside, rich with bone conduction, warm with the resonances of your just awakened body. And if someone is there to hear you, they'll hear your external voice, perhaps rough with sleep, carrying the particular quality of morning in its tones. Neither perspective will be complete, both will be true, and the gap between them will be as present as ever. But perhaps, after our journey tonight, that gap will feel less like a problem and more like an old friend, familiar and accepted. Think of all the voices in the world right now, millions of people speaking at this very moment, each experiencing their internal voice while projecting their external voice. Conversations happening in countless languages, in countless acoustic spaces, each person navigating their own gap between internal and external perception. Parents singing lullabies, lovers whispering secrets, friends sharing laughter, strangers exchanging pleasantries, all of it. Happening through the medium of voice, all of it involving the same dual nature we've explored tonight. And think of all the sleeping voices, the ones that are silent now but will speak tomorrow. As you drift towards sleep yourself, your voice will join this temporary silence, resting until it's needed again. But even in silence, even in sleep, you remain a vocal being. You might speak in your dreams, your vocal cords making tiny movements that don't quite produce sound. You might snore, creating sound without consciousness. You might murmur or sigh, your voice expressing something even while your conscious mind rests. The recording technology that reveals the gap between internal and external voice is barely more than a century old, a blink of an eye in human history. For thousands of generations, humans lived and died knowing only their internal voice, never confronting the surprise of hearing themselves from the outside. They sang songs that were never recorded, told stories that existed only in the moment of telling, spoke words of love that vanished into air as soon as they were spoken. The external voice existed, of course, but without recordings to reveal it, it remained unknown to the speaker. We live in a unique moment in history, when we can know ourselves from the outside, when we can hear our external voice and be surprised by it. This is both a burden and a gift. A burden because it adds a layer of self-consciousness that our ancestors didn't carry. A gift because it offers a perspective on ourselves that was previously impossible, a chance to know ourselves more completely, even if that knowledge is sometimes uncomfortable. Your voice will continue to change throughout your life. It has already changed from what it was years ago, and it will be different years from now. Your vocal cords will continue to age. Your resonant chambers will shift. Your breath support will vary. The gap between internal and external voice might change too, growing larger or smaller, more or less noticeable, more or less important to you. But through all these changes, your voice will remain uniquely yours, carrying the signature of your individual existence. Somewhere in the world right now, someone is hearing a recording of themselves for the first time and experiencing that shock of non-recognition we've explored tonight. A child, perhaps, suddenly confronted with the external reality of their voice, or an adult who has somehow avoided recordings until now. They're asking the same question you've asked. Why does my voice sound so different? And though they might not know it, they're joining a vast human community of people who have wondered the same thing, who have navigated the same gap between internal and external perception. The universe itself can be understood as a vast composition of vibrations at different scales. From the quantum oscillations of subatomic particles to the gravitational waves rippling through space-time, everything is vibrating, everything is in motion. Your voice is part of this cosmic dance of vibration, operating at the particular frequencies that human evolution has tuned us to produce and perceive. When you speak, you're participating in the same fundamental physics that governs the orbits of planets and the fusion of stars. But your voice is not just physics, it's also biology, the product of millions of years of evolution that shaped the human vocal tract for the dual purposes of breathing and speaking. It's also psychology, shaped by your emotions, your personality, your experiences. It's also culture, influenced by the languages you speak, the accents you've absorbed, the vocal patterns of your community. It's also personal history, carrying traces of every conversation you've had, every song you've sung, every moment you've used your voice to connect with others. In this way, your voice is a kind of autobiography, written in sound rather than words. Every aspect of it tells part of your story. The fundamental pitch reveals something about your physical structure. The resonances reveal the shape of your vocal tract. The accent reveals where you've lived. The inflections reveal your emotional patterns. The wear and tear reveals your age and how you've used your voice. All of this information is encoded in the vibrations you produce when you speak, available to anyone who knows how to listen. But remember, the story your voice tells is different depending on the listener's perspective. You hear one version from the inside, others hear another version from the outside, and recordings capture yet another version. Each perspective reveals some truths and conceals others. No single perspective tells the whole story. This is not a limitation but a richness. Your voice is complex enough to support multiple valid interpretations, multiple true stories about who you are. As we approach the very end of our exploration, let's return once more to the simple, physical reality of it all. Your voice is produced by the flow of air from your lungs, the vibration of your vocal cords, the shaping of sound by your throat and mouth. It travels through your bones to your inner ear, and through the air to your outer ear and to the ears of others. It can be captured by microphones, converted to electrical signals stored as digital data, and reproduced by speakers. All of this is mechanical, physical, measurable. And yet, from these mechanical processes arises something that feels almost magical. The ability to share your inner world with others, to be understood, to connect across the isolation of individual consciousness. Your voice is the bridge between your inner experience and the outer world, between your thoughts and others' understanding, between your solitude and your community. The fact that this bridge exists in multiple forms, internal and external, doesn't diminish its power. If anything, it reveals just how remarkable the simple act of speaking really is. Think one more time about the moment that started our journey. Hearing a recording of yourself and thinking, that doesn't sound like me. We can now see this moment differently. It's not a failure of technology or perception. It's a moment of encountering yourself from a new angle, of discovering that you exist in the world in ways you don't directly experience. It's a reminder that you are more than your own perspective, that you overflow the boundaries of your self-perception, that you exist richly in the perceptions of others. This is perhaps the deepest gift of the recorded voice phenomenon. It teaches us humility about our self-knowledge while also revealing our multiplicity. We don't fully know how we appear to others, how we sound, how we come across. There are versions of ourselves that only others can perceive, and this is true for everyone. We're all walking around partially unknown to ourselves, revealed fully only in the aggregate of all perspectives, internal and external, self and other. As sleep approaches, let this thought be comforting rather than unsettling. You don't need to fully know yourself to be yourself. You don't need to reconcile all the different versions of your voice to speak authentically. You can exist comfortably in multiplicity, being one thing to yourself and another to others, without this being a contradiction or a problem. It's simply the nature of being human, of being conscious, of existing as both subject and object in the world. Your voice will be there tomorrow when you wake, ready to carry you through another day of communication and connection. You'll speak without thinking about bone conduction or air conduction, without worrying about internal versus external perception. Your voice will simply do its job, bridging the gap between you and the world, carrying your thoughts and feelings to others, maintaining your presence in the shared human conversation. And sometimes, perhaps, you'll hear a recording of yourself and remember this night, this exploration, this journey we've taken together through the mystery of your two voices. Maybe the recording will still sound strange, but it will be a familiar strangeness now, an old mystery that you've made peace with. You'll recognize it as another true version of yourself, different from what you hear internally, but no less valid, no less you. The universe continues its vast vibrations all around you. Electromagnetic waves pass through your body. Sound waves from distant sources reach your ears. The earth itself trembles with frequencies below your perception. And somewhere in this cosmic symphony of vibration, your voice has its place. Small but significant, temporary but real, multiple but unified in its source. You are a speaking being in a universe of vibration, a voice among voices, a unique pattern of sound that will never be exactly repeated. Let yourself sink now into the silence that holds all sound, the quiet that makes voice possible. Your breathing is slowing, your body is relaxing, and your voice is settling into its nighttime rest. Tomorrow it will rise again, carrying you through another day, existing in its multiple forms, bridging the gap between inner and outer, self and world. But for now, it can rest, held in the same silence that holds the stars, the same quiet that preceded the first word ever spoken and will follow the last. In this silence, the mystery of your voice becomes less a question and more a presence, less a problem and more a companion. Why does your voice sound different on a recording? Because you are beautifully complex. Because you exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Because being human means being more than any single perspective can capture. Because the universe has arranged itself in such a way that consciousness can know itself both from within and from without, incompletely but wonderfully, partially but truly. And as you drift into sleep, you remain part of this quiet universe, wrapped in its laws, carried by its mysteries, held in the same physics that makes voice possible. Your internal voice settles into the voice of dreams, perhaps. Your external voice rests in the memories of those who heard you today, and recordings of your voice exist somewhere, preserving moments of your sound, waiting to surprise you again with their different perspective on who you are. This is the final gift of our exploration, the understanding that mystery and knowledge can coexist, that we can understand something scientifically while still finding it wonderful, that explanations don't diminish beauty but can deepen it. Your voice, in all its forms, internal and external, recorded and live, remembered and forgotten, is part of the larger mystery of existence itself. Every time you speak, you participate in this mystery. Every word is a small miracle of physics and biology and consciousness combining to bridge the gap between minds. And now, as our journey together comes to its gentle end, let everything we've explored settle into the approaching sleep. The questions can rest, the explanations can fade into the background. What remains is simply you, a being with a voice, multiple and singular, strange and familiar, yours and shared with the world. Tomorrow you'll speak again, and once again the mystery will unfold, your voice travelling through bone and air, existing inside and outside, being both the you that you know and the you that others know. But tonight, in this deep quiet, you can rest in the peaceful complexity of it all. You don't need to solve the mystery of your voice. You don't need to reconcile its multiple forms. You can simply be what you are, a conscious being with a voice, part of the vast conversation of existence, temporarily silent but always ready to speak, to reach out, to connect, to add your unique vibration to the symphony of the universe. And as you drift into sleep, carried by the gentle rhythm of your own breathing, remember this: your voice, however it sounds, however it's perceived, is precious. It's the sound of your existence, the vibration of your being, the acoustic signature of your presence in the world. Whether heard from inside or outside, whether live or recorded, whether familiar or strange, it's uniquely and irreplaceably yours. It's how you touch the world with sound, how you exist in the ears and memories of others, how you participate in the ancient human tradition of speaking and being heard. Sleep now, knowing that your voice will be there when you wake, ready to carry you through another day, ready to bridge the gap between inner and outer, ready to be both strange and familiar, both yours and the world's. The mystery remains, but it's a gentle mystery now, a familiar friend, a part of the beautiful complexity of being human in a universe of vibration and wonder. And as silence finally takes hold, as words fade into the wordless space of sleep, your voice rests too, held in the same vast quiet that holds everything, every sound that has ever been made, every word that has ever been spoken, every song that has ever been sung. In this cosmic silence, your voice finds its home, unique and precious, multiple and one, a small but perfect note in the infinite composition of existence. Rest now. Rest in the mystery, rest in the complexity, rest in the peace of not needing to understand everything to be part of everything. Your voice, in all its forms, will be waiting when you wake, ready to continue the conversation, ready to bridge the gap, ready to be wonderfully, mysteriously, perfectly yours.